our panelists, commissioners, and the public today on several important topics, including probation's 90-day deployment policy, depopulation plan, and IDC updates, a motion on probation's consulting contracts, and a report from our executive director. Here for probation today, we will have Chief Guillermo Villarosa, Human Resource Manager Deanna Carly, and Probation Intake Director Cesar Mayor Quinn. It is a busy meeting, so let's get started. I will turn it over to Wendy Julian, our Executive Director, to explain how you can participate during today's meeting, and then she will call the roll.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Mundo, and welcome to all of those of you who are here in person with us at St. Anne's and those of you joining us virtually on WebEx and on YouTube. We are recording, so if you're participating virtually, you're consenting to that recording. That's good news because that means if you're not watching, you can watch us later on the YouTube channel. As always, we encourage your participation in the meeting today. We welcome your comments live today here in person or on WebEx. You can also submit comments in writing, and I'll explain more how to do that. There will be an opportunity for public comment on each agenda item, and then at the end of the meeting for items not on the agenda. This is a special meeting today, but we are having general public comment as a agendized item at the end of the meeting. It's a special meeting because it's not our regular date. The regular date would have been last Thursday. The meeting was canceled because of the conflict with the BSCC meeting. The way this will work is that Chair Mundo will introduce the item. We'll hear any presentation there is to be made. The commissioners will discuss the item and introduce any actions they intend to take. Then we'll take public comment before the commissioners take action on the item. If there are more people here that want to participate than we have time for, the chair may consider shortening the time for public comment or scheduling an additional town hall for specific issues. We actually have already decided to do that about our inspections. I'll talk more about that later. As a reminder to commissioners, panelists, and the public, please speak directly into the microphones so that especially our virtual attendees can hear you clearly. For today, I'd like to ask everyone to respect the following guidelines. Please stop speaking immediately when your time ends. For those of you calling on the phone, I will break in to let you know when the time is over. Please make sure your public comment relates to the subject matter of the item or to the forum here with the Probation Oversight Commission. Please remain respectful of each other and the forum, and any person engaging in conduct disruptive to the meeting is subject to being removed. If you're here in person, it's easy to participate. Just come to the dais and we can, come to the podium that's in the middle and we will form a line to have you give your public comment. If you are joining via WebEx or telephone, use the raise your hand feature to join the line and we will call on you by your name or phone number. If you're on WebEx on your computer or phone, you tap the little hand icon, which is at the bottom of the screen, and we'll add you to the list. If you're calling in on WebEx, you press *3 on your phone to activate the raise hand feature and we'll call on you by your phone number. When we call on you, you may need to press the unmute button, which is the little microphone, or if you're on your phone, you have to press *6 to accept the unmute request, but I'll remind you of that later. If you have any technical questions or can't find any of the icons, please send a chat to the host. That will be able to respond to you and help you with that. All commenters will have 2 minutes today unless Chair Mundo decides otherwise based on the number of commenters. If you'd rather make your comment in writing, please send us an email to info@poc.lacounty.gov. That is going in the chat on WebEx. And please do not send your public comment in the chat. Only the host will see it. It will not be logged as public comment. The commissioners won't see it. I won't see it. And the chat function does not comport with our Brown Act responsibilities. If you need any accommodations today regarding materials or making public comment or anything related to ADA accommodations, please contact Janae or Sarah, who will be in the back of the room. Like I said, our meeting's being broadcast live today to YouTube, but there's no engagement with users on YouTube. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as our social media on Threads, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky at LA County POC for more information and so you can invite others to attend. Buenos días y bienvenidos a nuestra reunión. Ya hemos iniciado la conferencia aquí en vivo y también por WebEx. y en YouTube. Si le gustaría hacer un comentario público, por favor haga clic en la imagen de la mano y le abriremos su micrófono cuando sea su turno. Si está escuchando la conferencia por teléfono y quiere hacer un comentario público, presiona estrella 3 y le avisaremos cuando sea su turno. Si está viendo la conferencia en vivo por YouTube, no puede participar, pero sí puede estarnos viendo. Si prefiere hacer sus comentarios en español, le daremos, o en otro idioma, le daremos 4 minutos, el doble del tiempo, y podemos proveer traducción al inglés. Al iniciar su comentario, nomás avísenos que necesita traducción. Gracias. I'm going to call the roll. Commissioners, please respond when I call your name. Commissioner Dolores Canales is out of town today and excused. Commissioner Brooke Harris.
Present.
Commissioner Shea Jackson. Commissioner Millie Kakani. Commissioner Don Meredith. We're expecting Commissioner Sam Prater any minute, but he's not here at the moment. Commissioner Tyreek Ship is excused. Commissioner Diane Terry and Chair Mundo. Thank you. And Chair Mundo, we have a quorum, and we will note when Commissioner Prater joins us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Let's proceed with item 2, the approval of the August 14th regular meeting minutes. Wendy, do we have any written public comments or live public comments for number 2?
The minutes are attached to the agenda. No written public comments. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment in the audience about the minutes? Seeing none?
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the August 14 regular meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from August 14th.
We have a motion by Commissioner Kakani, seconded by Commissioner Terry. Are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Commissioners, please vote with a voice vote.
Aye. Aye.
Okay,
Abstaining. Abstaining.
abstain.
Thank you. We'll note in the notes that Commissioner Harris is abstaining.
To item number 5. Okay, so seeing that Chief Villarosa is not
Question.
here yet, oh, go ahead.
If I was not present at the meeting, but watched the meeting and reviewed the minutes, am I able to vote?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So we'll keep that as a yes. Perfect. So with waiting for the chief, we will advance our agenda to item number 5, which is we will discuss and take possible action on an update on probation's intake, detention, and control, or IDC processes, procedures, and recent changes. Here to present on this item is Probation Director Cesar Mariquin. Sorry about that, sir.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Cesar Mayorkin. I'm a
Give me 1
director.
minute. Thank you, Director Mayorkin. Can we put the slideshow presentation up for number 5? Sorry, we got started quickly this morning, so appreciate the flexibility of everybody. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself while we get the slides up, if that's all right?
Yes, thank you. My name's Cesar Mayorkin. I'm a director with the Probation Department. Been with the department approximately 28 years. Currently been reassigned to intake and detention control. And it's been about 4 months. And I'm here to present what we do, everything that we the laws that we abide to, and also the policies that we're following. So I do have a little presentation that I want to share with the public and the committee and the commission. And here we go. So I guess we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay. Give me 1 second here. Okay, the intake process. The intake detention and control unit is tasked to process the intake of all youth who are arrested or detained by law enforcement agencies who are brought into the juvenile hall for a process that we call an investigation. What the process involves is basically law enforcement agencies will call the IDC for initial assessment, and it's a phone assessment that's completed over the phone. Our IDC probation officers will interview the arresting agency. They'll interview the officers. They'll talk about what are the circumstances surrounding the arrest, a little bit about the history of the youth, and then they'll make a recommendation to the law enforcement agency whether to bring the youth in. So based on the assessment, a recommendation is made by the IDC probation officer to either bring the youth to juvenile hall for a further investigation or to recommend a cite and release out in the field by the arresting agency. If the youth are brought to juvenile hall, I just mentioned that we will do an investigation and basically we will decide to detain the youth inside the halls or to release the youth on a citation or to place the youth on house arrest until they go to court. At that point, a court report is generated and a court hearing is scheduled, what we call the detention hearing. Next slide, please.
Can I?
What guides IDC? So we have the IDC detention probation. I'm sorry, this is the next slide would be detention decision outcome. So what happens at this point?
Just hang on a sec. Commissioner Harris.
Can we just, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to pause for a minute.
Sure.
And I was flipping through the slides. Are you going to explain who staffs the IDC unit and what their special training is in making these assessments, their experience, things like that? I think that'd be really helpful to know.
And let's let him go with this presentation and then we'll revisit every question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the detention decision outcome, I mentioned earlier that we do an investigation. The decision outcome is based on two sections, which is section 628 WIC and 625.3 WIC, which I will explain shortly. There are five outcomes that come out of the investigation. The first one is detention at intake with a recommendation to remain detained at the detention hearing. That's basically telling the IDC officer is going to make the decision to detain the youth for the first initial 24 to 72 hours and recommend to the court to keep the youth detained at the hearing. The second option is detention at intake with a recommendation to release at the detention hearing on the community detention program. And that's basically making the decision to detain the youth at this moment. However, we are recommending that you do release the youth on house arrest, on CDP, at the detention hearing. Detention at intake with a recommendation to release at the detention hearing with no CDP. That's another option where we are making the recommendation to detain the youth. We're making the decision to detain the youth at the intake process and recommend to release the youth at the detention hearing with no house arrest. Release on CDP at intake with the recommendation to remain on CDP at the detention hearing. And that's basically the officer making the decision to release the youth on the community detention program at that moment, and also make the recommendation to continue community detention program at the hearing. And the last option is to release the youth at intake and to cite the youth to appear within 60 days. So there's five outcomes with the detention investigation and the detention decision. So going to the next slide, please. So what drives IDC? This is straight from the Welfare and Institutions Code. It's 628. And upon delivery of the probation officer of a minor who has been taken into temporary custody under the provisions of this article, probation officer shall immediately investigate the circumstances of the minor and the facts surrounding their being taken into custody and shall immediately release the youth to the custody of their parent, legal guardian, or responsible relative unless it is demonstrated upon evidence before the court that continuance in the home is contrary to the minor's welfare and or one or more of the following conditions exist. So these are very important. Continued detention of the minor is a matter of immediate and urgent necessity for the protection of the minor or reasonable necessity for the protection of the person or property of another. the minor is likely to flee the jurisdiction of the court. And the third is the minor has violated a court order. So these three options would pretty much require the probation officer to make a decision to detain the youth at that moment. Let's go to the next slide, please. Another important Welfare and Institutions Code that I would like to point out is Section 602. And this is just a section of the actual code. So except as provided in Section 707, any minor who is between the ages of 12 and 17, inclusive when he or she violates the law of the state or the United States of any ordinance of any city or county of this state defining crime other than the ordinance establishing curfew based solely on age, is within the jurisdiction of the court, which may adjudge the minor to be of the ward of the court. That is very important when we're talking about juvenile courts. Next slide, please. (707B) Welfare and Institutions Code. This is a term that has been used many times throughout the commission hearings. Also, it's used a lot with law enforcement agencies and also in the probation department. For the most part, 707B is a subdivision of the Welfare and Institutions Code, which lists some of the most violent and serious felonies. There are approximately 30 charges listed under 707 WIC. I've listed some of the more common and some of the most serious examples below, which we got murder, attempted murder, robbery, arson, kidnapping, carjacking, assault by any means of force likely to produce great bodily injury. Next slide, please. The next one is very important. It's pretty much what I mentioned earlier when I talked about 628 WIC, and also 625.3 is a very important WIC code. And what this states is, notwithstanding Section 625, any minor who is 14 years of age or older and is taken into custody by a peace officer for the personal use of a firearm in the commission of an attempted commission of a felony or any offense listed in subdivision B of Section 707 shall not be released until that minor is brought before a judicial officer. Next slide, please. So those WIC codes that I presented earlier are pretty much what IDC goes by. Our department is in alignment with those statutes. And we pretty much are following the protocol and the policies and the statutes to ensure that the youth that we use the least restrictive detainment for the youth, and to make a decision at the IDC intake process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the statistics in March. So we, for the most part, the department presented the commission with some statistics back in June, and they were March 2025 statistics. What I did an analysis of the March 2025 statistics and facilitated and presented, well, it was presented to the commission. And I do want to show that in March, IDC processed 225 intakes. And as you can see, if you look at the chart below, of those 215 intake investigations, we completed 196 intakes, which were physical intakes, meaning that 196 youth were brought into juvenile hall at the time throughout that month. What I did, I broke down the type of charge categories for each detainment. We had 707B offenses. We had approximately 73, which was 37.2% of the 196. Firearm charges, we had approximately 38, which is 19.4% of the 196. The warrant charges, we had 49, plus the additional 2 out of state, which made it 51 warrants, and that's 25% and 1% respectively. Failure to obey a court order, which is typically a CDP violation. We had approximately 15 CDP violations for that month, which was 7.7%. Evading police in a vehicle, we had approximately 5, which was 2.6%. Resisting arrest, which resulted in assault, we had 1 in total, which was approximately 0.5%. Family violence victim in the home, we had 3 intakes, which was 1.5%. Intercounty transfers, approximately 6, which was 3.2. And placement, runaways, change of placements, we had approximately 4, which is 2%. So in total, we did process 196 physical youth that came into the facility. However, I do want to point out, I did mention 215. So I do want to point out that 19 of those were actually either adult youth, former youth, who are now in adult custody, who had been charged with 707B offenses. Even though we did process an intake on those adults, they were physically not brought to juvenile hall. In addition, we had a failure to obey a court order, which were camp violations, and those were processed through IDC as well. We had approximately 7 violations, and because those youth were already in a camp environment, already detained in camp and doing a program there, they did not go to juvenile hall as well. And then we had the last, which is what we call an in and out order. We had a youth who was already detained in juvenile hall, and he was pulled out by law enforcement to be charged with additional charges. We did not count that as a new youth to the facility. Next slide, please. So this next slide basically talks about the IDC recommendation and detention decision versus the court outcome. What I did, I pulled, with the analysis that I did with the March statistics, I reviewed the court outcome and cross-referenced it with the recommendations and the decisions that we made at IDC, which is what I believe is important for us as well as the department, also the commission. If we do look at the chart, you will see that we did 149 recommendations for detention. And what that means is that we had, at intake, we had approximately 111 males and 120 females who were actually recommended to remain detained in juvenile hall. I mentioned earlier the 18 that were already committed to a camp program and also adult custody. Those are also listed in there. So in total, we did a recommendation of 149. Were those youth detained at the hearing? Approximately 128 of those were detained. So in essence, the court was in agreement, 86%. Contrarily, we had 19 youth who were not detained, and 16 of those, the judge either released on the community detention program or released home. And 2 of those were actually DA rejects. 3 females were released at the detention hearing, contrary to what we recommended, and basically 0 were DA rejects. When we talk about CDP recommendations, the department, our IDC unit, made 63 recommendations. 55 of those were male, 7 were female, and 1 was what we call detained on CDP prior to detention hearing, which is what we call a promise to appear. It's a PROTAP. So we released the youth at the intake hearing, at the intake process. Released on CDP, we had 31 males who were released, 6 females, and of course, the judge continued to keep the youth that was released on PROTAP on house arrest. So in essence, we had 38 that were actually released on the community detention program, and that's approximately 60% that the court was in agreement. Contrarily, we had 19 males that were not released, one female that was not released, so that's approximately 20. And out of the total, there was 5 DA rejects. In addition, we had what we would call an IDC site out. So IDC made recommendation, actually made the decision to cite 3 youth out. And of course, those youth went back to court 60 days later and were not detained. So they were released to the parent or guardian at that point. Next slide, please. What I do want to point out is that courts will not always agree with the probation officer's report. And so there are several factors that we have to take into consideration, or the court will take into consideration. And this includes, but it's not limited to, some of the following items. The DA might, not agree. They might have an objection to the DA's, to the release on CDP. There could be additional charges that are brought forth. New information could be brought forth at court regarding the home dynamics. The parents' whereabouts might remain unknown, or there might be new victim information, or simply the criminal history. So the judge looks at all these factors and will not always agree with the probation officer's decision and recommendation. So in March, we did pull the releases, and this information was also presented to the commission in June. And I do want to point out that Los Padrinos has multiple detentions occurring daily and multiple releases occurring daily. It's important to understand that not all releases and detentions are directly correlated to the IDC investigative process. We have youth who are home during the court trial and might be violating their terms and conditions of probation, and the court might decide to detain the youth. That is not handled through IDC, so those youth are being detained in juvenile hall, and respectfully, the court has made the decision, and respectfully, the probation department has to take those youth in. Contrarily, there are releases where a youth might be detained in juvenile hall after the IDC process, and during the trial, the court might have enough mitigating factors that would allow the youth to be released, and the youth could be placed on CDP at that point. So that is beyond the IDC process. Case in point, this data was presented to the commission. We had 92 CDP releases in March. However, of the 92, only 57 of those releases were attributed to the IDC intake investigative process. The additional 35 CDP releases were respectfully youth who had already been detained, who were in juvenile hall, and during the court trial process were released on CDP. As you can see, other releases were done throughout the month. We had suitable placement releases with 33. Some were released home, just 33. 7 were released to Dorothy Kirby Center. We had 12 released to camps. I'm sorry, we had 12 released to camps. Barry J. Nydorf, we had 3. Camp Page, we had 1, and so on and so forth. So these releases the data is taken out of PCMS, and that was presented to the POC. I do want to make it clear that IDC does not track the releases throughout the month. However, I do want to point out that is our goal to basically look what the recommendation is, and also what is happening at the initial detention hearing. So that's what we are tracking. Next slide, please. So what is the detention criteria? Well, most detentions are driven by statute, court order, and probation policy. So all intakes are evaluated on their own merits, and all facts are taken into consideration. However, the decision to detain or release the youth is guided under the provision of Section 628 WIC, and I presented that earlier, which states that it is necessary if one of the more of the following conditions exists. So if the youth meets these next three criteria, we must detain, we have to detain the youth. So continued detention of the minor is a matter of immediate and urgent necessity for the protection of the minor or reasonable necessity for the protection of the person or property of another. The minor is likely to flee the jurisdiction of the court. And number three, the minor has violated an order of the juvenile court. In 2024, our executive team provided a revised detention criteria, and it was disseminated to all our justice partners and law enforcement agencies. Next slide, please. So I talked about data. I presented data from March and how we're driving, how we're getting those numbers. So the probation case management system, PCMS, is a primary system used to populate new data. Supervisors, deputy probation officers, and clerical staff, they enter that data and the information is stored permanently in PCMS. IDC officers, as they generate new intakes, all data is entered in that system. When data is requested, we utilize our IT team, which we call ISB, Internal Services Bureau. The data is extracted from PCMS and generated into specialized reports. These reports are then reviewed, vetted, and validated by the operations to ensure accuracy. Next slide, please. My goal, IDC's goal, the department's goal, is to enhance the quality of the reports. And by doing that, we want to ensure that the reports are in alignment with the department policy and also in alignment with the outside stakeholders and also in alignment with the statute. So the process includes, but it's not limited to, monthly team meetings. And what we plan to do is continue meeting with our IDC probation officers to ensure that they're up to date with any new policies, anything that affects their decision at the time of intake, and also in accordance to Section 628, that we're making the right decision. Again, I mentioned earlier that we do want to use the least restrictive decision for the youth. And that's our goal, is to continue monthly team meetings with our team. Of course, they're coming on board. I did a deep dive into IDC. I looked into the stats. I looked into the reports. I reviewed hundreds of reports. And I did realize that there are discrepancies in the report writing process. There are discrepancies in the data collection. And so what we did is correct that, train the staff, and that's why I included refresher training. So it's important to provide our officers with training, with up-to-date policies to ensure that they're doing the reports right and to ensure that we're in alignment with the policy of our departments. System data review. So we introduced an IDC log that was used in the past, and the log documents all incoming inquiries, intakes, field site out recommendations. In addition, it captures charges, arresting agencies, charge categories, youth demographics, and detention decisions. And this system, this internal mechanism that we're using, is really used to provide our supervising team and our management team real-time information. So as an officer's entering their data into the system, we can monitor at the end of the day or at the end of the shift to find out what they did during that shift, to ensure that they're entering the data correctly and to ensure that we are generating correct data for the department and also for outside stakeholders. It is important to understand that, also, as with all systems, whatever information is put into the system, if it's inaccurate information that's being plugged into the system, it's inaccurate information that's going to be provided to our outside stakeholders. So what my goal is, and what is to basically to review all the data that's being entered, and this internal mechanism is pretty much in the right direction. The fourth option in quality control is case reviews. So my goal as an IDC manager is to review the reports that are being submitted to the courts. And part of that is pulling approximately, 10 cases, 15 cases per month, maybe more, review them with my supervising team to ensure that that the officers are actually making the correct decision, that they're abiding by the WICs that we had talked about earlier, to ensure that we're trying to give the least restrictive decision for the youth, and to ensure that we're doing the right thing. So it's important to facilitate case reviews. And then last but not least, PCMS enhancements. I mentioned earlier that I did a deep dive into IDC, reviewed hundreds of cases, and I mentioned discrepancies in the report writing process. I am working with our IT department to enhance some sections in PCMS, which will help our officers create better quality reports, minimizing mistakes, and to ensure that we are producing top quality reports and data to our department and our outside stakeholders. So we're talking about reform efforts. Next slide, please. My apologies. So the Los Angeles Detention Screener, we call it the LADS, is an assessment tool used by IDC probation officers, which is intended to screen juvenile offenders for recommendations for immediate detention or detention alternatives. Youth scoring above a certain point threshold would be detained. Youth within a certain range would be referred to what we call a pro tap, or being released at the detention at the detention intake process and being placed on a community detention program. And the other option would be a non-secure alternative, which would be citing the youth out. And those would be those that have a very low score. So our department is actually in the process of enhancing the LADS. It's an ongoing project that's been going on for over a year. I just got brought onto that project, and we are looking forward to continuing our efforts to continue to enhance that LADS and move forward with a better quality LADS, which would be the screening tool. Outside stakeholder relationships and education. Well, as an IDC manager, it is important to really facilitate judicial outreach, to meet with some of the judges and find out what are some of their concerns with the reports. Also find out what their take is on certain releases, and also just to find out and pretty much collaborate with them and work, with them to ensure that we're providing quality reports. So meeting with the judges and discussing the quality is very important. Second thing I put here was DA, public defender, alternative public defender outreach. Of course, I did a visit with the East LA courts in July and did speak to some of the public defenders, and of course, they had some concerns regarding our quality of the reports. So my job and my goal was to listen to them and also to ensure that, we're taking in that information, assessing what their concerns are. And of course, that's why I mentioned that reaching out to them is also important. Last but not least, law enforcement agency training. IDC is open to facilitate training as far as the IDC process, explaining the statutes that we abide by, our policy, and we've actually already did a presentation with one of the police agencies, and looking forward to continuing this and also enhancing the information that we're providing to law enforcement agencies. Collaboration with and efforts with DYD. So in July, I did facilitate a meeting with the DYD directors and additional, DYD team members. So based on the meeting, it was concluded that DYD is meeting with various members of our department. And the goal is to discuss opportunities to receive predisposition referrals. So I am open, IDC is open to continue these efforts to discuss and explore options to link our IDC officers with DYD's resources. So these meetings will continue, and I'm looking forward to hearing from DYD to continue and meeting with them to ensure that we're providing a good platform of referrals for our youth who are being released on house arrest. And excuse me, when I say house arrest, I'm referring to a community detention program. My apologies for that. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I talked about how we are collecting our stats. I talked about how we are, enhancing our reports. I mentioned what IDC follows, what statutes we follow, what we go by. And I'm also talking about some of the things that we're trying to do to enhance and make sure that we do the right thing and proper detention decisions. With that said, I want to thank the commission for having me here, and I want to open this up for any questions.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank Director Mark Queen. This presentation started with some questions I had about the March data. And he painstakingly went through every case, which I know is a task with the systems we have. So thank you for that. And before we start asking questions, I just want us to be mindful that we have a very packed agenda today with some serious nuanced subjects. So let's try to keep our questions quick and succinct and give everybody an opportunity to ask questions and also give the public an opportunity to weigh in. The chief is scheduled to be here at 10. So we'll be mindful of that too. So with that said, Commissioner Prater.
Sure. Just one quick question about. Oh, my bad. Sorry about that. One quick question about the data. Thanks for compiling all of this. I think I heard you mention that you'd already presented some information, this March information to this commission. And then I saw on this one page about the quality control. Are those sort of like forward-looking sort of goals for IDC, or are these sort of like things already in place, like the monthly team meetings, et cetera?
So some of the items are already ongoing, like the team meetings have already been ongoing. On enhanced training, that's something that I'm bringing forward because as a result of reviewing the data that was presented, I did find some discrepancies on how the data was collected, on how some officers were basically coding a report, whereas they might be providing the judge or the court proper information. However, they were coding it incorrectly on the system. Those I've corrected. And that's what I'm talking about, enhancing training and also making sure that we're all on the same page. So that's moving forward.
Okay, just want to kind of just add to that. So we're looking at data from March, about 6 months ago. Is there a reason why in September we're looking at data that sounds like you've already presented to this body, and we're still kind of going through? And I might have missed this at a previous meeting, so I apologize if I'm asking the question that's redundant. But wanted to understand, is there more recent data that you guys have available rather than just the March data that you've already presented?
Yes.
Let me the March data was presented in a whole different context. So it wasn't presented as an intake data. And so it's when it was presented under another subject that I asked for a deeper look in it, just for the March data.
Do we have, the question is about, do we have recent data? That's what I'm asking.
So to answer that question, the answer is yes. I have been compiling information and data from June through August. And obviously we can't have data for September because we're still working through that month. But all of it, as I mentioned in the data collection, we pull the information, but we still have to vet it and validate it and make sure that it's correct. So I'm in the process of doing that. I'm working with my my upper management to see if that data can be presented to the commission. But yes, I'm working on compiling and providing validated data. My goal is to be transparent and make sure that we're doing the right thing and presenting correct information to my bosses and upper management as well as stakeholders, if that's what we're required to do.
Forward to the update. On update data. Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Harris, followed by Commissioner Terry. I think I saw your hand.
So, question for you. Points of intake are a real, there can be a lot, it's a huge responsibility. And we know that the racial and ethnic disparities of the young people that are detained in Los Angeles County, as well as around the state, are abhorrent. And I'm wondering if the IDC staff has been trained in disproportionate minority contact, or, you know, what the impact is on not only the statistics, but the kids that we're detaining, but with particular respect to, you know, racial and ethnic disparities. Is the staff currently undergoing training on bias or any of those things? When is that part of the calculus when these decisions are being made?
So to answer your question, that's a good question, by the way. Our officers go through what we call one-on-one training. So if an officer gets assigned to IDC, they sit with our supervisors and also some of our more seasoned staff who've been with the IDC unit for quite some time. We do go through regular training that other officers do, but as well, aside from that, we also do training which requires one-on-one training with our team to make sure that we're making the right decision. And the stuff that I presented earlier, like the statutes, all that's taken into consideration, and that I don't have an answer of the training that was presented, that was done to our previous officers, but I can assure you that moving forward, we will continue to work with you guys to make sure that we're providing proper training for everybody. But other than that, I strongly feel that our officers are real qualified in making decisions, detention decisions. They have been working diligently to painstakingly make phone calls, talk to the officers, ensuring that they're doing the best they can to try to release the youth if possible. I did mention earlier that the 707Bs, I mentioned the numbers, and I do want to point out that our officers are actually doing the best to see that they can do the least restrictive confinement for those youth. And I do have some data, and I have information that I've reviewed that pretty much makes me feel confident that we're doing a good job. However, there's also room for enhancement. So to answer your question, it's an ongoing process. So.
Commissioner Cherry.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I had a training related question as well, and it's stemming from a series of town halls we also did around intake and what's possible in that first assessment point. So looking at the criteria, it sounds like it says continued detention of the minor when it's necessary for protecting the minor. So how are staff trained on how to make that assessment? And I think they have 48 hours, so which seems like a short amount of time to make that sort of assessment. So if you could share more about what that looks like, the training, and how staff are trained to know whether or not they can make that recommendation.
Correct. So I mentioned earlier the criteria that was disseminated last year. Our officers are, per policy, following that criteria. However, they are doing a deep assessment of the use, basically home dynamics, gang involvement, access to weapons, times of when the youth got arrested. And what we're trying to do is basically ensure that they're asking the right questions. Part of the training, which is ongoing, and part of the quality control that I plan to impose, is asking those additional questions. And if the officer feels confident that the youth will not basically, pose a threat to the community or to the victim or to anybody in the home, why not put them on house arrest? So all that can be determined, will be determined once the officer is doing the investigation. So again, we go by criteria. We do follow the statute, and we're talking about a 2-day confinement. So what happens is that we try to make a decision at that moment to see if we detain this youth now, because maybe the statute might say to detain them, and we have to make that decision. We could make a recommendation to release the youth either on house arrest or just have the youth released, period, if they have a stable home environment, and that we can be assured that they're not going to be a threat to the community or to the victim or anybody else, and or themselves. So we definitely, and to basically give an answer to, there's so many dynamics going on at the intake level, and our officers are pretty much doing that investigation, and a lot of it has to do with communicating with the supervisor. I'm involved in some of the decisions as well. So yes, yeah, it's basically ensuring that we make that right decision at that moment. So I don't know if I answered your question. I talked a lot, so please, if I didn't, please ask me again. So
Can you share an example of a time where a decision was made for a youth to not be detained? And so just to kind of show how an officer might go through that assessment process. And again, this is in 48 hours, which seems like not a lot of time, but
So it all starts with the interview with the law enforcement agency. So they'll talk to the officer who's actually making the arrest, and they'll discuss the case. They'll find out what was the youth's role. I'm going to use assault, which is 245 PC. I did review the releases and the recommendations for the statistics that we provided, and it was, we did release a youth on ProTap who was arrested for assault. Part of it was because, they had a stable home environment, and the officer did a great job in basically reviewing the case. We also had an evading case, which per the new criteria, we detained. However, we pro-tapped the youth. We released them on house arrest, which is pretty much what we were really trying to do. I met with my executive team on a couple of days ago, and they're in agreement. We want to basically make sure that we're doing everything possible to release the youth. But those are just some examples. We can really do a deep dive into each particular case. However, our goal is to move forward and make sure that we're doing the right thing as of June, basically, because we started, recently we just started, working with our new internal mechanisms to make sure that we're gathering correct information. But yes, even though we have something listed in our probation policy criteria, there's still a little bit of wiggle room that we can still try to mitigate the case and see if we can release the youth. We either release the youth on a period and just cite them to go to court, or release them on house arrest. So we're doing as much as possible. So.
Okay, Commissioner Kakani.
Thank you for being here. I just had, sorry, let me just put my notes. Sorry, so you said that you joined IDC. You're the director of IDC?
Correct.
And you've been there for 4 months, is that right?
Actually, 5 months.
5 months,
Yeah,
okay.
get
And
on
so
point.
prior to that, what was your experience?
My experience, well, I've been with the department for 28 years.
I just
and
know that before when we met, you were at Central, so just
I-
curious.
I was actually in Los Padrinos, one of the directors over one of the buildings. And
Okay.
I pretty much, oversaw 2 buildings, 2 units, actually 4 units. And yeah, I mean, I've been in a management role since 2016, starting back from Camp Anazuka, worked my way through Dorothy Kirby Center. I came to I got promoted to director, and I went to SOMAR for a few months. I was part of the central team, came to Los Padrinos, part of the move.
But intake is newish.
It's newish.
Okay,
But I did mention I took a deep dive.
sure.
And I'm really reviewing the policies, reviewing the statutes that drive IDC, and I'm,
Okay.
And he sat with me about 4 or 5 hours now, so
Yeah.
we're
I
getting
appreciate
him up
that.
to speed
Yeah.
quickly.
I asked because, as you're aware, the county and probation entered into a settlement with the Department of Justice in 2021. And one of the kind of mandates was for you all to evaluate and revise, if determined by the monitor, probation's procedures at intake related to probation's decision-making as to whether to exercise its discretion to detain youth, right? And to include a validated risk assessment tool, because there were some concerns around whether the LA detention screener was a validated
Right.
tool or not. And I just, for the public's sake, right, at least as it relates to the Department of Justice's report to the court in December, the department was not in compliance with that specific provision. I mean, amongst many other provisions, but that specific provision, the Department of Justice deemed that you all were not in compliance with that. And I was reading Ms. Corrigan's report, and I'm not sure if you've read it or if you've read her updates. No, okay. Then, I mean, this context is wildly important, right? Because She writes that during the first part of the 6-month monitoring period, and that was just July to September of 2024, a subject monitor expert worked closely with the IDC director to further refine the original draft screening assessment. And that was supposed to be the D-Ray. And so it seemed like the department was moving in that direction. And the D-Ray, I forget what it stands for, Detention Risk Assessment Instrument, I believe. And then it states, I mean, it's almost comical, except that it's not, because this impacts young people's lives and whether or not they're detained. But, right, so there's all this effort being spent to improve and refine this detention risk assessment instrument. And then I think, what does it say here? During October 2024, the department unexpectedly announced a shift away from the D-Ray under development and a pivot toward a new detention screening instrument project led by the chief research analyst in the department's Systems Analysis Bureau. So are you working with the chief research analyst in the department's Systems Analysis Bureau?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I just joined the committee about 4 months ago.
Okay.
And yeah, we are basically, it's not a new risk assessment that we're using. It's the one that has been used in the past, and it's in the process of being enhanced. And that's basically to address the concerns that were brought forward with the DOJ recommendations. So
this report states that you had identified by late February 2025, not you, sorry, the department, that was the target date for sharing a draft instrument with department leadership. So is there a draft instrument that has been shared? Or are you all still working on that?
I don't have an answer to that at this point, but I could assure you that I can provide that in a future meeting. And also, the team is continuing to work together, and they're pretty much going through the analytics and trying to, we have a very smart IT team. We have some very qualified people working with the department who are behind this, and I can assure you that they are doing an excellent job in trying to provide the draft. I mentioned earlier, I did just join the committee. I am actually trying to get more information and ensure that we are, whatever the revise or the enhancements are, that we are going to put that in place and ensure that we are going to use it. So
yeah, I'm not doubting people's intelligence or abilities. It's just, it seems a little concerning, especially given that earlier this year, I believe it was Ms. Epps who was presenting, who shared that some percentage of young people were also being evaluated by this other tool that has since been abandoned. So it is a little confusing. And just again, I don't know, it would be helpful if there was some clarity, because I think you said that there was some detention criteria that was shared with law enforcement and other folks in 2024?
correct.
Okay. Is that what's still being used, or is that being revised?
That's pretty much what we're using at this point. And that was provided to you guys, I think, in June as well.
Okay, so that hasn't been updated?
No, at this point, no.
Okay. But okay, I guess I'm just a little confused because the tool is being updated, but then the criteria is not being updated?
Well, the criteria is pretty much based on what's always been in place, like a statute. It's just basically compiling all the charge categories, and there was concern with that, that it's creating a blanket detention decision, but that's pretty much not the case, because as I reviewed some of the cases for March, there were certain cases that if we were to have followed the criteria to the T, then those youth would have been detained. However, we did recommend PROTAP, and we did recommend a release on multiple of those cases for the detention hearing. So.
Okay, and then, sorry, just two last questions.
No. I'm going to go on to Commissioner Jackson. Those are great questions, but we can stay here on this subject all
Yeah.
day.
I would just like to know, again, around the override policy, if that has been established, given what the detention screener establishes, and when the department decides to override whatever it is that the detention screener recommends, if that's established, and whether developmental disabilities are a part of the assessment, and whether that's, I don't know, researched, investigated upon, and if recommendations are made based upon that as well.
So your question is to discuss the override policy or? Oh, oh, yes. So it's written in our policy. If a youth basically does not merit a detainment, based on the investigation, based on the statute, let's say, for example, the criteria does the charge category or the charge itself does not fall in the criteria to detain the youth. However, the IDC officer feels that I have to detain this youth for whatever reason. It could be a reason that there is a safety in the home, or that's found out throughout the investigation. If it's not in policy to detain the youth, then the officer has to bring that up to the supervisor or go up all the way up to the director to basically override and hear the case to make that decision to detain the youth. Vice versa, there might be a situation where the statute might state detain the youth. However, you feel that it's not a situation where the youth, really poses a threat to the community or doesn't fall in those three categories that I mentioned earlier. And that would also require discussion with the supervisor and directors to say, hey, you know what? I feel that we need to release this youth and put them on house arrest, or maybe release the youth. And I don't think they will cite the youth, but maybe put them on house arrest for the next 2 days.
Thank you. Commissioner.
So the
Jackson.
override policy is still in effect.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson.
Sure, it's brief. I'll join other commissioners in thanking you for taking the time to look into this and to present this report to the commission. Is there an intention to present or submit these reports or the data to the commission with regularity?
That's something that I will have to discuss with my upper management. I have the data, I have the information. However, how we're going to present it to the commission, that's something that I can discuss with my upper management.
Okay, Wendy, I'm curious. I did take a look at the data dashboard. It is a bit dated, and so part of my question is about us bringing that sort of up to speed, making sure that it's current. Alongside that, I'm wondering if it's worthwhile considering like including intake and release data in our data dashboard. I really want us to keep a close eye on those sort of numbers, especially as we predict some upticks in the population. So.
If by dated you mean dead, then I would agree with you. The dashboard with respect to population statistics cannot be updated because the definitions of the data on the daily population statistics we receive have changed. They've actually changed, I don't want to exaggerate, I think it's 3 times since we started the dashboard. So, for example, there's not a distinction between how many SYTF, girls and gender expansive youth, there are on the data statistics now. So the dashboard would show strange dips to 0, which really makes it not usable for the public. So we have adjusted to providing the regular fact sheets. And that's what we're doing for now, although we're not giving up on the dashboard or on the department in the ability to maintain data definitions on those daily population statistics or find another alternative, which is what you suggested. So you may recall there was a motion, it was actually part of the MOU that we signed with the department to provide something like the monthly intake log that Director Mayorkin just mentioned that would allow also for the inclusions of things like charges, law enforcement agencies, et cetera. We can get some of that information from the snapshot, which is how we're doing the fact sheets. Sure. The problem with the snapshot is that it's a snapshot. So you can't actually do a dashboard with that, but those are the conversations that are in progress. And I'm hopeful, my number one hope is that the department would do the dashboard themselves, would actually present public-facing data around this. I think that's the best answer. And that secondarily, we could work with the data teams at the department to provide regular data that would allow for an ongoing public dashboard.
Okay, thank you for that. It's a priority, obviously, for this commission to tell the story through evidence-based data collecting, and so we should focus on that as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. We will go ahead and move on to public comment. Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments?
I don't believe we had any written public comment on this issue. If you'd like to make public comment in the room, can you please come up to the podium? If you'd like to make public comment online, you must be registered on WebEx. You can be there on your computer or smartphone or on your telephone call-in. Use the little hand function to raise your hand. And I don't see anyone in the room coming up to give public comment. Do we have anybody online? And no public comment, no written public comment as of yet, right, Janae? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Huntsman, I understand you had some information to share this morning.
Yes, yeah, you had a commissioner.
Maybe you just need to switch it on there.
Thank you. A commissioner asked some additional questions that you didn't have time for. As you know, when this commission was revitalized, the Office of Inspector General was asked to do technical monitoring of the probation department, and we discussed with the board how to do that. The board directed that we should receive 10 positions for that to do the kind of detailed analysis that you've been talking about. We were never given those positions. We were given 4 positions, which is how many we have now. And the result has been, as I predicted, catastrophic. We had a lack of compliance with court orders, similar to what's been discussed today. And now there's a DOJ effort to take away juvenile hall from the probation department. Unfortunately, on Thursday, I was informed by the executive office that a number of positions in my office will be taken away from me and moved to the executive office and will no longer be available for independent oversight. That's in addition to curtailments because of the county's severe financial problems. So we're going to lose about 1/3 of our OIG staff. And as a result, we will be severely impacted in our ability to support this commission. The things that will definitely be first on the list that will continue to do our monitoring work, where we've worked with the Department of Justice, that will continue both at the Sheriff's Department and in probation. Of course, your one of the means you have to insist on your voice being heard is your subpoena power, which we support you with, and that will continue. But our ability to provide other sort of analysis, for instance, we're working on the LADS right now, doing some reporting on it. That sort of reporting will probably stop, and there will probably be a severe limitation on what we can do as to probation. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that. That will happen legally, I believe, as part of the supplemental budget on September 30th. So I wanted to notify you. Thank you.
Commissioners, final questions or comments? Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, I was curious to know exactly like which positions they were considering, which positions are going to be impacted by that. And if there's any opportunity for us, Wendy, as a commission. I know we were talking about a new position, but I can't tell if somehow that position would be addressing what's going to be absent from the OIG.
Your position, which is staff that is directly for the commission, is not part of OIG. What will happen with that, I don't know.
Sure.
What I'm talking about is main OIG positions. There's a group of staff that have been specifically identified by the executive office and taken away. And then there are positions that are curtailed. So the end result is we have, 1/3 fewer people, which will impact our operations. But your discussion about a position that may be a predictor of what will happen with it. It might not, but it's a totally separate thing.
Sure, I do understand that, but I'm just wondering how we would sort of substitute for that on this commission.
Max is completely right. And that position you're talking about was actually funded in last year's budget. So not a part of the current discussions.
Okay.
Commissioner Kokani.
I think you shared that some of the staff are going to the executive office.
It appears so. I know for sure some are. The executive officer spoke to me earlier in the year and took 2 of my positions, telling me I'd be able to fill them. But now I'm told I cannot fill them. And in this last Thursday, a couple more were identified, were specifically being taken to the executive office. What their function will be there, whether they'll conduct oversight, but at the direction of the executive officer instead of the Office of Inspector General, or whether they'll do different things, I have no idea.
Okay.
And then there's additional positions which we pulled out, and I don't know where they'll go.
Got it. Okay, thanks. That was my question, if they were going to be holding the same responsibilities within the executive office, which doesn't make sense given
Don't
that you
know.
all are an independent. Okay. Thank you for that. And I'm really sorry to hear that.
Hey, we're going to go ahead on to return to item number 3. But before we do that, I'd like to just say that I'm ecstatic that the DRE was derailed. And if that requires that probation have a little bit of an opportunity to revisit the lads, that's a good thing in my eyes. So item number 3, we will discuss and take possible action on updates from Chief Guillermo Villarosa and HR Manager Deanna Carly on the Probation Department's 90-day deployment policy of field staff. The POC has asked the department to explain the policy, purpose, and process, in particular how staff are/were informed about the process and how effective the policy has been in addressing the department's staffing needs. As a reference, we have included probation's HR updates from July 24, 2025, and the Adult Field Services presentation from August 14, 2025 to today's agenda. Chief? Oh, there you are. The floor is yours.
Good morning. I want to make sure I understand the items to be addressed. You're interested in the policy of folks that are off work because of the high number of staff that are asking for light duty. But I think in addition to that, but if it's improper at this point to give a brief update on where we are with the depopulation and the BSCC and those inspections are also in this item, are we taking it all as one or
It's 2 agenda items.
is it two?
But they can be taken out. Can you combine them? Yeah, I don't see no objections there. Yes. And with your first question is just explain policy, purpose, and process.
Let me just, if I can, for a point of order, we're talking about agenda items 3 and 4. Agenda item 3 is what the chief said first, which is about the 90-day deployment policy, the issues about callouts, and some of the data that's been provided previously. Agenda item number 4 is the update on the depopulation plan. And so the chief has asked, and there appears to be a consensus to combine the reports on those 2 items. Am I saying that correctly?
I'd like to discuss 3 by itself.
Okay. So I want to make sure that I'm able to separate 2 separate processes. One of them is the department's attempt to use the staff available, namely field staff, to support the number of staff that are available at the juvenile hall and SYTF. And so the department has tried over the course of the last few years a variety of strategies. One of the strategies when I came into the position had been the deployment for a year of a certain number of staff from the field, after which they would be rotated back. And so you hear this term rotating into the facility and then rotating back. In each of the attempts, we have had an insufficient number of staff. And so regardless of whether it was a year-long deployment, whether it was voluntary overtime, mandatory overtime, doing part of your regular shift in a facility, these are all different attempts at increasing the staffing numbers in the facilities. None of them were sufficient. And at the end of each of those periods, the department was still found to have insufficient staffing by either BSCC or some other entity. The latest strategy had been a rotation for 90 days, which I think is what was being referenced. But it is often confused with a parallel strategy of how to deal with the fact that a high number of staff, and when I say high number, I want to make sure that we're not talking past each other. It's a majority of field staff asking for an accommodation to not work in a facility. The strategy there is that typically in a law enforcement department or in any other agency, when an employee asks for an accommodation, you have the capacity, especially in a county as large as ours, to find work for them for that limited time that they're requesting it. In this case, when at points, in excess of 85% of the staff being deployed are asking for an accommodation to not go to the facility, there is nowhere to put them. In other words, we can't invent work for folks that you don't have simply because they're asking for that. And that whole piece, I think, Ms. Carla has spoken here before with respect to sort of the rules and what the department has done with respect to that. I mention that because I don't know that folks distinguish the two. And so many times when they talk about the 90-day, what they mean is the having to burn their time because we cannot accommodate more people versus the you're being selected to go to the facility because we're short in the facility. They're two different programs. They overlap, and I could see why staff or other folks would confuse those two. In reality, there have been multiple strategies at the same time. There have been overtime requests, the movement of staff for a long period to the facility, and folks that are on rotation. And yet with all of those overlapping, still short. The latest strategy that is really the department is considering is what the Inspector General actually recommended years ago before I came on, which was to essentially close the field and utilize all of the field staff in the facilities. That was a recommendation that is so catastrophic when you first hear it, because you still have a requirement to run an entire probation department. And yet here we are after attempting all of those other strategies for staffing. I think we're at the doorstep of essentially doing that. And so that's meaningful because what has confused our officers has been when you send me to the facility, let's say you send me for 60 or 90 days, my understanding is that I'll be able to go back to my job at the end of that. And I empathize that as one tries to organize their life, they almost consider that a contract. It isn't, because the needs of the department have to continually be reassessed. And if at the end of your rotation, there is no other employee to rotate behind you, that is why you end up staying at the facility. That's been one of the largest complaints from the union. It's been one of the largest complaints from the officers themselves. And I understand it. It is essentially, if you do the math and every staff member in the field rotates for 2 or 3 months, and then they're done and they go back to the field, and it's sort of, it's sharing in the responsibility or in the pain or in the disruption. But if there is no one to come in behind you because they have submitted a document that shows that they're unable to perform the duties, then that doesn't relieve the department of the necessity to have staff to care for the young people in our care, and you don't rotate back to your normal job because there is no one behind you to do that. That isn't the department changing the rules on you. That isn't the department not wishing that you can go back to your normal duties that we would like you to be able to perform. It is the simple reality that in no case, under no circumstances, can we, we're required by law to have sufficient staff in those facilities. And that when we weigh the legal responsibilities that the department has to care for folks that are in custody versus supervise those that are in the field, juveniles versus adults, there's a difference. And so the greatest amount of responsibility and care are for those that are actually detained with us. And if that means we don't perform some other duty or you're unable to go back to that job at the end of those 60 or 90 days, those are the decisions that are being made. And so essentially, we're now at the point where the department is not able to continue with the 90-day deployment policy because there simply aren't sufficient people to do the rotations. And that aside for what are essential functions such as producing pre-sentence reports to the courts, doing violation reports, that every other able-bodied peace officer and probation is going to be deployed to one of our facilities. The immediate question then becomes, for how long? Well, for as long as is needed to meet the staffing requirements.
Before we go to questions, Commissioner Merritt, let me ask if Ms. Carly has anything to add to today's presentation. in answering the questions, obviously.
Sure. So turned on? Sure. There we go. There we go. Sorry. In line with what the chief shared, I can elaborate just a little bit. I was a little confused as well, 90-day deployment versus 90-day accommodation process. Our team in DMC, Disability Management and Compliance, is overseen currently by DHR, but obviously, you know, I'm very embedded in the process and understand what's going on. And at any given time, I've reported out several times on the accommodation process. There's not a policy for our 90-day rotation accommodation process. It all falls under the legal parameters of the law. So, you know, FEHA, EEOC, the ADA guidelines, all of that, you know, and the county policy on accommodation, that all governs our process. But what we've done is, because we have so many staff, as the chief explained, who are asking for a reasonable accommodation, we've identified what's reasonable. We've identified a certain number, and I know not everyone agrees with that, but we've identified going through, and this is a 2-year process. We started looking at this way back with the deputy directors and the bureau chiefs, I want to say in 22, trying to identify, and this was part of our building the probation assistant position, to identify how many staff can we safely have that are not peace officers, that are providing some of these functions and still perform our mission. And so that's where we came up with basically our process for accommodation in the field. We've done this in the juvenile hall since 2019. We've had a 90-day rotational assignment, because in the juvenile halls at that time, we had more staff requesting accommodation than we had positions identified. And so what we did is we said, okay, we're going to accommodate everybody, but it might not be your accommodation of choice. And if any of you have ever had a medical note, I have, and it said, hey, please accommodate Deanna. She can't type. She needs to, you know, take breaks every hour. And if you cannot accommodate her on the job, then she's considered totally temporarily disabled, and approved leave should be provided. So that's where the leave piece comes into play with this. If we can't accommodate your request, whatever it may be, then we are accommodating by providing approved leave. So we are accommodating all the staff, just not necessarily in the method or way that they would like to be accommodated. And just to, I think there was a question about how staff were informed. So in August of 23, an email went to all staff regarding the accommodation review and post requirements. That was kind of the first communication that went out. And then in May of 24 last year, an email went out to all staff informing them that we would be implementing this process that we previously only had in the juvenile halls and doing it in the field as well. Does that answer most of the questions regarding the accommodation 90-day versus deployment?
I'll just add that thank you, Ms. Carlisle, for providing that update. And you'll see a link to the agenda for the public, 2 items that were previously presented to this commission, which is the most recent report that Ms. Carlisle gave, as well as the adult field services report that we discussed at the last month's meeting. So those are linked under this agenda item, just for convenience for the public to be able to have access to those.
Hey, Commissioner Meredith.
Chief, I appreciate you. I know the vision you have. You're trying to have to rob Peter to pay Paul here. The big problem I have on this is that, well, twofold. One is that there are certain staff that every 3-day holiday weekend call in and they don't seem to get dealt with. The other side of the coin is these accommodations came up after people were to be deployed. Now, they were hired as peace officers, and there's a certain requirement there. If they were truly injured in the line of duty and can no longer perform their duties, then they should be retired and off the books. And I say that because last meeting, somebody was here from, I think it was Adult Services, that said, oh, I've got 2 or 3 that are on permanent disability and can't come to work. The question was, why are they still on the books? And, you know, I agree with you. We need to do twofold here with your probation assistant or probation service officer development program. But if these people aren't coming back to work and all these notes came up after the deployment thing, I think we need to take a hard look at saying, thank you for your service. You can go to either Parks and Rec or you can be with the agency. That's where I'm coming from, is we're getting scammed and we're not either able to do anything about it or not doing anything about it. But yet we do have people that are legitimately injured on the job that seem to be caught up in the mix.
I agree with everything you said. Part of the complication is that I'm trying to remedy 30 years of not guiding employees out of a position after they have provided documentation that they will never be able to perform the essential functions. And so we've really gathered a high number of employees throughout the years that we already knew couldn't perform the duties. And so it's not simply dealing with cases as they appear now. When an employee presents for an accommodation that's not limited in duration and that interferes with the essential functions, I understand that many employees believe that that was tied to functions in the juvenile hall, not realizing, no, those are general peace officer functions, and you're unable to perform the functions in the juvenile hall or in the field. All of that with the backdrop in a county in which civil service protections are out of line with what we know is normal and good employee behavior. And so that when we talk about disciplining employees, it's really two different things. One of them is helping employees when they're unable to perform the functions and either retraining or finding another position or retiring. That's one side. The other side is when employees are simply taking advantage of the civil service protections in the MOU and choosing when they come to work. That is even more harmful because we don't know how many employees to expect on any given weekend. This particular weekend was another example of that. There were over 200 employees that did not show up to work over the course of the weekend at Los Padrinos. I can only speculate why that is. In my mind, I have no evidence of this, but I too observe that when there are any entertainment of particular interest to the general public, it seems that our staff chooses to do that. If there's a boxing match, if there's a local sports game, then you can almost directly tie our staff not coming to work. And to say that, look, our folks are both committed and 200 or more of them make the decision to not come to work, those two things really don't match. So I agree with you. Part of it is understanding that you need to perform the essential functions in the position you're in, regardless of assignment. And the fact that, if this was a fire department, it would be much easier to explain. You cannot run a fire truck with 3 of your 10 firefighters and the other 7 accommodated and working from the firehouse. That's essentially the situation we're in. You also can't say, I cannot perform this job, but please keep me in this job. We have been too slow as a county to help folks find other work within the county or retraining, or simply helping them through the process of retirement, disability retirement, whatever it is they're entitled to in a much more quick fashion. When we go to the accountability component of it, is because our employees are very well aware that they can take their chances. And the Civil Service Commission in all likelihood will come back and say, no, give them another shot, or not really understanding the devastation that not showing up for a shift in a detention facility has. It means that a young person may not be able to get the program in time. It means that a staff member or someone providing services can be assaulted in the interim when there isn't enough staffing. It means that a parent that has to leave work to go pick up their child cannot leave because they're being held over. It's not simply that an employee, made a small mistake and they can be retrained. Not at all. People's life and liberty really depends on them coming to work on time and staffing those units. And so I really would hope that the Civil Service Commission and our entire county process pivots to understanding the severity of this behavior, because I concur with you. We're years into this. Enough is enough. If a staff member is a no-call, no-show, they should no longer be employed as a peace officer.
Well, and like I said, I've got the longest experience here in this commission. And for 23 years, it's been a cultural thing, and we're stuck because of this cultural thing. But when Jerry Powers was here, we actually brought in Department of Insurance to go through some of the workers' comp and stuff to get that out. The biggest problem is that it's the same names over and over again. What I'm looking for is the good hard workers, and there's a lot of hard workers. I was at Los Padrinos, and the staff I was talking to that are regular staff, hard workers working sometimes 2 shifts, they had the same complaint. What are we going to do about the ones that are gaming us? And you're right. There was a fight over the weekend, so they have to call in to watch the fight. It was a holiday weekend before. It's the same people that take, and I'm not sure how this policy works, but it's something I can just all of a sudden call in family leave, or I can all of a sudden just call in this. That, you're right, doesn't help prepare deployments. And so I'm not frustrated with you, Chief. I'm more frustrated with the people that are gaming us. I just wanted to air that.
Yeah, and I want to be clear because I don't want folks to think that we haven't been doing everything possible to address this. I think if you take a look over the course of the last 18 months, the amount of discipline that has been doled out is incredible. So it doesn't compute. You say, not you, but it's look, folks' behavior will change once they're addressed. I can show you evidence that that's not the case, that, hundreds of disciplinary actions later, 0 dip in employees' behavior, because ultimately the question is, do I get to keep my job? And if the answer to that is yes, then we have a significant number of folks that are willing to continue the behavior.
Okay, commissioners, next. Commissioner Harris, followed by Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Chief. I actually find this light bulbs are going off in my head. So I really appreciate you distinguishing the 2 90-day policies. That's the first time it's made sense to me. So probably, hopefully, other people too. And I also appreciate the transparency. And what I hear you saying is that you're taking the position on behalf of as the leader of the department, that the focus has to be on the detention facilities. Is that right? Did I hear you correctly? Okay.
Absolutely.
So the consequences in the field, both for youth and adults, are it's a consequence you're willing to accept because of that prioritization that the juvenile facilities have to be staffed appropriately at all times. Is that also?
Not with indifference and not without further action, but yes.
I actually don't, I didn't hear you say that. I'm trying to clarify. And did you also say that 200 people called out this weekend at LP?
Yes.
200?
That's not an exact number. It's probably slightly more.
Okay. Okay, I thought I heard that, but I actually don't have a question. I just wanted to make sure that those are all of that is tracking in my brain the way you said it. Okay.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Chief. I have a bit of a hard time with the idea that you can't reinvent work, understanding that with the kind of issues that we have, they require some creative problem solving. I just like this idea that the population is going to increase is like looming. The sustained shortages, the retention issues, the cumbersome hiring process, I'm like struggling with understanding why you can't get creative with the problem solving, understanding that this policy has failed, and so have many of the strategies that you've employed, right? We've heard testimony from staff members and also had some public comments submitted that suggests that people even who are on light duty can perform some duty, right? So if there are thousands of probationers out in this field that can receive some type of servicing through perhaps some creative solution, temporary solution, like virtual resource hub, virtual supervision, like something to have some kind of contact. I'm aware of young people who haven't seen probation officers in some time, and I think that it creates the risk for recidivism. It's like a direct pipeline back into incarceration, right? And so when I think about you having this rotation, obviously it doesn't work. The accommodations create a lot of restrictions. But if you have staff members who are willing to dive in, and perhaps it's not in the way that you imagine it to be, and it's not the most effective way, isn't there ways to utilize staff in a different way just to meet the need of the moment?
I can't tell you how much I appreciate this question, because I often don't have the opportunity to explain the reasoning why that's not possible. And it's not possible for a number of reasons. One of them is I don't believe I have the authority to make those accommodations, and let me explain. If there are essential duties that a peace officer must be able to perform in California to have that enhanced authority under the penal code, I deputize them. I take the responsibility for deputizing someone to carry out those additional powers on my behalf. And when an employee tells me, provides me documentation that they can no longer perform those duties and that it is not limited in term, then really, no, I can't. You have now, it would be irresponsible of me to put you in a situation in which you've already told me you cannot carry out those duties and you can be harmed or someone else can be harmed. So I want to address that part of it, because much of what we're talking about are not limited term accommodations. The majority, from my perspective, are employees telling me I will never be able to perform that, and some of them saying I have never been able to. And so really, we can't talk about what do we do short term, because you've already told me you cannot be in this position to carry out these duties. With respect to the question of, but there's still use for the person can still perform some functions. I'll tell you, we really need to think this through from beginning to end and take into account employee behavior to date. Set aside the fact that I can't redefine what the classification, what you can do. I've taken the step of being creative and creating a different position that doesn't require you to be a peace officer, but can do many of the things that you said you can do. That's the probation assistant position. You said you can't do X, Y, and Z. And so we took the time to create a different position that says, we want to retain all of your knowledge. So we created a different position that says, it's not going to replace this, but it can supplant. And we absolutely need you to be able to do those things. Our staff has been wholly uninterested in filling those positions. But the most important part I want you to consider is, and maybe I'll give an example. It is absurd to have 10 people inside of a unit interacting and providing services to youth, and then 40 of them on the perimeter being accommodated. And that's exactly what was happening. And moreover, and this is the part that absolutely has to be taken into consideration, if there is an option for an employee to say, I'm going to select which parts of my job I want to do, then the majority of our employees will decide that they don't work in juvenile hall. And they'll say, I'm happy to do X, Y, and Z. But as you know, when we take jobs, not 100% of the duties are things that energize us. And that in fact, being a peace officer means that there's going to be a whole host of things that aren't exactly what I woke up in the morning and wanted to do, but that I understand is important, and there's no one else to do it. But we're in a situation in which it's already proven that if you start taking people's accommodation requests, our staff, and they dictate which portions of the job they're going to do, we would have the majority of our staff choose to not work in juvenile hall. And that really doesn't advance our requirements by law and caring for the young people that we have. So I think we have been creative in trying to capture the knowledge base. It hasn't played out as anticipated. I hope that in the near future, as our employees work through the fact that this isn't limited in term, if you have a permanent circumstance that doesn't allow you to do all of the work, you're going to have to find another alternative. That at that point, I hope some of them are interested in we need them in the probation assistant positions if that is something that works for them. We need the knowledge base, we need the people that are already trained and that can do that portion. It hasn't happened today.
Can you say more about closing the field? Like what that is and what's being discussed and like the reality of it?
Yeah. So, so we haven't closed offices. There's 2 offices that are being closed, but that's because of budget. And so we haven't, in fact, we don't have a wholesale closing of the department, the services. And we've really been functioning generally on the fantastic officers that we have that have been willing to be deployed and do overtime with their regular job. I mean, think about that for a second. They're deployed to a location that isn't of their selection. They're performing their duty. And then on top of it, because they have a commitment to the field work that they do to their casework, they're coming back on weekends, they're coming back on their time off. And through overtime, we've been able to keep much of the services in the field going. It's of course been affected because we have staff that is no longer at work. They're being accommodated off work. And then we have a whole other group of staff that's in the field. But the way that we've essentially stayed alive is through the commitment of the staff that we have doing overtime to keep some of the field work going, such as the reports to the court. We're now entering into a phase where it's just not sustainable. And so what's going to happen is that the minimum number of staff that is needed to continue performing, go back to the court work, are going to stay in the field. And that's it. And everyone else is going to go in. And then we're going to have a small number of officers that are going to continue to do home visits where necessary and take referrals. And then we've entered in the MOU through the chiefs of police to capture information when they contact or make referrals for our adult probationers. So it's an assessment of, for example, if you're on electronic monitoring or if you're on juvenile supervision, you'll likely still have an officer assigned to you. If you're an adult, you may not, but there will be an officer sort of assigned to your group in the event that you reach out and ask for a referral, or that we need to see what happened with your urine analysis, or if there's a home visit. It's just not going to be in the traditional way where, everybody has an officer that's working their case.
Okay, one last comment, and thank you so much for that. I feel very strongly that the culture issue within the department is going to claim its fate, right? Because all the plans that we've seen, you name it, the underlying issue remains to be staffing, right? So if you don't address the issues, maybe it was the fight, maybe it was some other thing, but historically speaking, this is an ongoing issue that is attributed, it's caused by many things, you know what I mean? And I don't know if we see enough of the planning, the resolution around some of the core issues that's maintaining the status quo, right? And so if you rid the Department of Field Services, or you you shrink the department in that way, and then all of the staff are confined to the facility, so to speak, and the culture issue is preserved, the call outs persist, then you just have this kind of thing that's more contained. But that's the way that I envision it. You know what I mean? So unless you're really kind of getting to the root of the issue, which I don't see enough of that being discussed and strategized around, I can really just see this being more of the same and being exacerbated by them not having the option to go back to their original assignments.
So I want to make it clear, I'm not shrinking the department. And so I'm not shrinking the number of positions aside from sort of the budget process. I'm reassigning available officers where they're working. That's different. I continue to try to hire and continue to use a variety of strategies that haven't been used before to attract more officers and to have retention. Those things continue. I agree with you that these are all sort of strategies to maintain daily functioning, but that the core issue of culture really is what needs to be changed. And unfortunately, organizational change and culture change takes many, many years. We're smack in the middle of it. And maybe it's something we don't talk about enough here, but that is underway. I think I've mentioned before that one of the principles moving forward is that it's one department. And so this department has been fractured into bureaus and to classifications and to classifications that are better than others, and you earn assignments. We're done with that. If you're a probation officer, you're a probation officer. And you need to be trained to be able to perform all the duties of a probation officer and be called upon to support your fellow officer and to provide services to any client, whether it's a juvenile, an adult, a man, a woman. That's what we do. And so that change is underway. And there's a whole host of things that we're doing slowly to get there that isn't obvious. But when you change the names of bureaus, when you change the way that that the money is doled out in terms of positions, not individual, but like by bureaus and how those decisions are made. When you go to a single uniform rather than being able to make decisions, when you say, no, you need to be able to do all of it. When you go to the academy to be trained on how to interact with adults and juvenile, all of that is happening. The dividends for that come way down the line. We're also changing the FTO program so that you're not just going to the academy, but when you get out of the academy, you're going to be supported and we see your interactions. Folks' accountability with respect to how our internal affairs works has changed. All of those things, I'm confident will have long-lasting effects to, with respect to the underlying culture, be supportive of an environment for real professional activity. It's just not in the immediate. I mean, those are all things that are happening in the background. But I don't want you to think that, every time I come here and I tell you that folks aren't coming to work, because that's the truth. I don't want you to think I'm anti-employee. I mean, my responsibility is to all of the probation officers and the support staff. And I would rather be talking about the things that help them be able to perform their job and the increasingly sophisticated series of activities we ask them to do. It becomes extraordinarily difficult because we're working on new training. It's tough to roll out new training when we have to use every hour that an officer has available because we have shortages. We recently, with the concurrence of the union, have agreed to try an alternate work schedule in the facilities. The idea of that is a benefit for the employee. Employees are being held over, and their lives are so disrupted that one could understand why there's reluctance sometimes when you're going into work for 8 hours and you're not anticipating getting held over for 16 or 20. That's incredibly difficult. And when we talk about burnout, it's one thing if this were occurring for 6 months, or if probation employees, going back to the 90-day, if you were to tell folks you need to do this for 90 days and then your life goes back to normal, that's very different than the reality, which is we have no idea when it's going to go back to normal. So I'm constantly looking for things that we can do to support their ability to be healthy on the work site. This is a long time coming, in my opinion, which is trying an alternate work schedule. What that allows folks to do is have some anticipation of when they have to work that 16-hour. Right? I can plan my 16-hour. The idea is that then it's not a guessing game. I know I need to prepare for this 16-hour, and then the likelihood of me being held over some other time is less. And the most important part for me is then at least it gives you a 3-day decompression. I'm going to work these hours, but then I have 3 days off because it's very different having to go right back to work after 2 hours of that grind. I think we can do that while giving a bit more of predictability. This is all, however, dependent on employee behavior, right? This is the department attempting to work with the union and create an environment that supports the needs of the staff. There's very few areas where we can do that. The number one thing that I am told constantly is create a safer environment for staff and they'll go back to work. Hear that all the time. The only way that that can happen is for all of the staff to go to work. And I keep trying to, convince folks of that. That's not something within my power to do. I'm happy to talk about actual requests of what you think would make it a safe environment. But there's very few recommendations with respect to that.
So we'll take the question from Commissioner Prater, then we'll do public comment, let everybody process the answers the chief has provided, come back, ask a few more questions, hopefully yes and no questions, and then take a break.
Not yes or no.
Yeah, I definitely don't have a yes or no question for you. Sorry about that.
Well, but that,
Sorry to disappoint.
no, that's after this one.
I don't know that anyone, these are complex, what I like to call wicked problems because the solutions are often very complex, they're difficult, they're hard. And so, given that paradigm, I don't think that a yes or no question is possible. But I guess, I'm still trying to process. I'm with you, Commissioner Brooke. I just kind of feel like 200 plus people not coming to work is insane to me. And, as someone who, like many people here who run organizations, I just cannot imagine a reality in which I had to contend with that kind of HR crisis, right? And so it is apparent to me, like I feel like it feels a bit like Groundhog Day, right? Like I've in my time with the commissioner, I've heard this song from this department over, and it is like on repeat. And it is apparent to me that the things that we are hoping to accomplish for our young people, the services, the rehabilitation, the care, the love that they need to chart a better life, can't happen if our human resources, if we don't solve this problem, right? And so I guess these are just questions. Maybe there isn't an answer to them, but questions around like, so then if we suspect that there is fraud or abuse of a system, then what is the position? I'm glad to hear that there's some hope, right? You said there's some things that you're doing culture-wise, right, to make the department operate more efficiently by, getting rid of silos and, et cetera, that you just enumerated. But then what is county legal doing to sort of figure out like how do we, if we need to maintain fidelity to laws around like folks leave, but it shouldn't, the laws aren't, I don't know, this is my optimistic view, but shouldn't be designed to handicap or hamstring, critical operations like the Department of Probation. So what are the conversations with county legal to figure out, where can they be helpful in kind to sort of like get ahead of this problem from a legal point of view? Like this feels abusive. And I get that, and it feels like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Are the abusive conditions or, terrible conditions, at least from the perception of the folks who are working inside? If that's what's causing people not to come to work, how do we solve that? Then we have the other crisis of not being able to recruit and hire people. It feels like quite the conundrum, and I guess I'm wondering what, outside of the culture changes, what other levers can we be pulling to sort of like solve the fact that north of 200 people on a given weekend aren't showing up for work? Seems, I don't even have an adjective to describe that. That is just, I can't even wrap my head around that. And so what else can be done? Where the county supervisors, like the EO's office, like what is being done about this human resources crisis? Because if this isn't solved, I can imagine in a world in which the youth that we are and the adults that we have a responsibility to serve will be served. Or your hands just up and say, listen, this is what it is. You're ringing the alarm every time you get a microphone to no avail. Like what are you hopeful for? Like what do you think needs to happen? So take that on the record. What needs to happen? To kind of solve the issue of folks just choosing not to come to work, if they're abusing that, I just have so many questions. I'm really just more stunned. So sorry if I'm just I'm just rambling on, but it's stunning to me if that is the case, given that we have lives in our care who can't get the service that they need because we don't have the human resources.
I promise you I wanted to answer this with a yes or no, but
That's not my department. That's
okay,
the
I'm
mayor's
incapable,
department.
but I am going to try to be a bit more brief. I want to remind folks that the things that we are doing is the right response. It's simply that some of it is going to take time because we're, again, sort of deferred actions for many years and in some cases, decades. And so the correction isn't just dealing with today's behavior, but what we have been accumulating for all of those years. Secondly, going back to the point of culture, the system was designed with an expectation that you have reasonable employees under reasonable conditions, and that on wholesale, they're not going to utilize their FMLA or their other protections really to such an extent that is going to hamper your ability to provide services. That in itself couldn't happen without the mistakes that the department has made, and without all of the other, it's sort of a perfect storm scenario. And we're dealing with each of them individually, but that means that you don't see progress quickly. I will say one of the most difficult components with respect to gaining additional staff, the discipline piece, and we do work with county council, and we are, as frustrating as it is, we will continue to make progress there, even if it's molasses. The real issue is, are officers feeling supported and wanting to come to work? We cannot ignore the fact that they do feel unsafe, that the job changed, that they feel like it's more violent, and that they do not have the support of the county, of this commission, of me. This is just how employees feel, that they are essentially on their own in a violent scenario in which no matter what happens, they lose. That is the sentiment. We work hard to show them that that's not the truth. That is the sentiment they have, and it is, and it has an impact on their behavior and our ability to recruit. Additionally, and I know I've said this before, and I'm going to continue, if employees believe that this is a department that may not exist tomorrow, if employees believe that they will receive no support from any of the county entities in recognizing that what we're asking them to do should be compensated at a certain level. In other words, if you say you're a probation officer and you believe that you need a raise because what we're asking you to do is more dangerous, who is going to speak up and support that? I mean, typically when I go places, it's perceived as anti-probation officer. And as you know, I'm not an apologist for bad behavior by officers. That's not tolerated. They cannot continue to work. And if it's criminal activity, I think we've made obvious how we will deal with that. But it is also true that officers feel like there is no support from anyone, and we're asking them to do a job, but at every turn they're going to be opposed as being bad actors. And so there has to be a balance at some point in which the county, the department, all of the support systems say, we're going to invest in you. We understand it's a difficult job. You need a training center. You need longer training. Maybe you need more vacation hours. Maybe there's an incentive. All of those things that we don't want to, and understandably so, we don't want to in the midst of bad behavior because you don't want to encourage folks to continue that way until they receive it. At some point, we do have to acknowledge this is probably a tougher job, and we need to take a look at all of the mechanisms that the county has at its disposal to support the officers as well as we're trying to support those we serve.
Move on to public comment on item number 3. Winnie, do we have any written or live public comments?
No written public comments. If you'd like to give public comment in the room, please approach the podium. And use the raise your hand function or dial *3 on your phone if you're on WebEx. If you're on YouTube, there's no way to make public comment. You need to log on to WebEx, which you can do by going to the agenda at our website, poc.lacounty.gov. Click on meetings, click on September 15th, and you'll see the way to log on WebEx. So we will begin and welcome Mr. Pettis.
Good morning. At our last meeting, Commissioner Canales requested that probation DPO2 field be returned to their offices, and I just want to upfront say I support that request. The other thing that everything here, listening to the chief shifted. On one hand, we're talking about 300 people in juvenile as opposed to 17,000 in the field. That's a big difference. We just let the community to be unsafe. John Maxwell says everything rises and falls on leadership. What I'm looking at is that the officers are being blamed for the department. We have no power to change the department. Whatever the department says, that's what we go by. But right now, I'm on that 90-day rotation, meaning I work 90 days, I'm off 90 days. I work 90 days, I'm off 90 days. The same job that I left on August 19th when they sent me home will be the same job that I'll be returning to. And all that work, the department pays overtime for somebody to do that work while I'm out. The work doesn't stop. The field doesn't stop. We got 17,000 people out here who we promised that we provide services to: mental health, domestic violence, substance abuse, someone getting their GED, someone getting their social security card, someone getting their driver's license. For a lot of things that we as DPO2s, we handle and we're talking about. But if we're not at that office and we can't build a rapport with the community if we're not there. Someone comes to the office and they give them a sticker that says, come back. They come to the office, they give them stickers, they come back. These people, some people need a lot of the services that probation promised to provide. And they have nowhere else to go. If they go to Caltrans or something like that, they charge them $45 to try to be on a work program or something like that. That's already funded through probation. And what I came, I am so, how do I go home and tell my wife and my family I'm not working? That 90-day rotation on face value is 90 days. It's actually half a year.
Thank you. Just to clarify, and since the dashboard is not up and running, the total detained population, including all of the facilities, is about a little over 580 at this point. I think Mr. Pettis is referring to the juvenile hall population. I just want to clarify that for the public. 21,000 in adult. Thank you. Good morning, Helen.
Good morning, Helen Eichenberg. I've been coming here for a couple of years now, and I know, I'll admit right up front, there's a lot I don't understand all these processes. What's frustrating to hear over and over again, the House is clearly on fire. We have heard you say numerous times that this is going to take time in order to make changes, but we're not seeing any at this point. We begged you in December to go in and reassess all the kids that were LP, and to the ones that didn't need to be there, to let them go. And all we hit was resistance. I'm hearing now with the IDC reports, which seem like one of the pivotal moments for the youth. There was supposed to be reform in 2021, and it's 2025, and the reform is maybe now just starting 4 months into 2025. This is all at the expense of these young people. And it blows my mind. To hear 200 people didn't show up for work makes me want to cry. And what is that doing? And to the people that did show up and to the youth that are there and not getting what they need, we have to start thinking outside the box. If probation can't do this job, then we need to start thinking outside this box. If people don't want this job, why are they signing up for it? Working with youth is very different than working with the youth population. And if we are not training them to really know how to work with youth, then yeah, they're going to get in there and they're not going to want to do it. We've got to start thinking outside the box, because I don't want to see another Brian Diaz. And that's what I fear every day. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Melissa Logan, and I'm a DPO2 in the field for the INVEST program. I wanted to speak today on behalf of our clients and the community we serve. Recently, I was told on a Thursday that my last day would be the following day, Friday. I had already set up appointments for clients, men and women ready to change their lives, go to training, jobs, but instead I had to cancel meetings with them. There was nobody to replace me. This happens across the department. We promise second chances, but then are forced to leave our clients with nothing but unanswered voicemails and auto-reply emails. These are people who have finally made a choice to change their life and looking forward to showing their children a better way of life. Taking away consistent support destroys trust and sets our clients back. We are constantly rotated every 90 days between the field, juvenile hall, and/or sent home, regardless of the impact to our adult population. Let's be honest, if juvenile halls haven't been fixed in 5 years, this is not because of staff, it's a leadership failure. Pulling deputies from adult supervision and programs that support them doesn't solve those problems. It only creates new ones in the community and leaves a whole generation of system-impacted persons on a continued cycle of lack of resources. It harms the very clients we are entitled to help. Adults who once fell through the cracks of a broken juvenile system are now being abandoned in a broken adult system of this department's own making. The chief's decision to outsource our field contacts to police departments has undermined the care first, jail last approach we were meant to embody. In practice, this flips the model on its head. Our new reality feels more like jail first, care last when it comes to adult supervision. The department says its mission is to build safer and healthier communities, yet by abandoning adults who are ready for change and who have built rapport with their field PO, we are doing the opposite. We are breaking trust, wasting resources, and undermining public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. We'll go to the online public comment now. We're going to start with call-in user number 4. You need to dial *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. Your phone number starts with 818-374. Call-in user number 4.
Hi, can you hear me?
You can. You can begin.
Okay. Hi, this is Taliba. First, want to open up with a definition of a good leader. It's the ability to guide and influence the group toward a shared vision by fostering motivation, trust, and collaboration, often through strong communication, empathy, strategic thinking, and integrity. We do not have that in Guillermo, and I'm looking forward to this receivership. As far as what's going on with the disability, they are not being truthful. Disability, as a person that studies human resource management, disability, when given to employees, it should be done on a case-by-case basis. For instance, my personal experience, I was accommodated before any of this was happening. So you lumping everybody in the boat that they ran and got notes, and that's not true. This chief is not being honest. He needs to go. Another thing, when I last looked at my field position, it doesn't say anything in here about working in the halls. It's a light duty assignment. We do not have safety retirement. We're not like other law enforcement agencies or even other probation agencies. We have to work longer. So being able to work in the field gives us a chance to still have a job and not have to quit at 50 years old or 40 years old because we don't have the physical ability to work in a juvenile institution. What he is doing, he is decreasing the size of this department. And I guarantee you, if he continues to do what he's doing, he's not going to have anyone, and he's going to be the one going in working with those kids. Thank you for your time. Well, no, one other thing. Right now, this department is facing approximately 9 lawsuits for violating ADA. And believe me, if the judge took that in, the judge agrees that they are doing illegal measures. Thank you for your time.
Much. Okay, we'll go next to RJ. You can unmute yourself.
I am a constituent in District 4 now. I'm a retired senior probation director. I spent the last 27 years of my life working in adult supervision as a line staff, a supervisor, a consultant, the adult consultant to field services, the adult consultant to AB 109 when we built that program, and then later on to our a collaboration with ODR, where we built certain programs like the mental health housing court. And I have a couple of questions, one of them being, how does this change in the focus in adult field affect our SB 678 funding? That funding is reliant on the fact that the probation department exercises and practices certain evidence-based principles in the supervision of our population in order to reduce recidivism. We were on the cusp of realizing our core supervision model in 2024 when this 60-day rotation and 90-day rotation off of work for employees who are on work hardening or some kind of restriction totally decimated our ability to do that. And I'm curious, A, as to where that is now and how that is affecting our funding, because it became a quandary for us as managers as how do we build the state for funding for what we're supposed to be doing when we're not doing it, our staff are in the halls. So that's one question. That's kind of to the chief and everybody in general. Number two, I have to say this whole idea of pulling people from the field and putting them in the halls came from the POC. September 2022-23, you guys met and Nicole Brown said, you can solve this problem by pulling everybody out of the field. And this is where we are.
Thank
So
you.
the last point I have to make.
That's your time. Thank you very much. Our next caller is Eva.
Versus education with all deliberate speed. And I think that there needs to be, all we've heard this morning is the problems and why the problems can't be solved. Instead of solution and coming with a solution. For a person in a leadership position to say my hand is not a leader at all. And we could do out of the box thinking, like maybe ask the probation officers what their solution is, because somebody needs to have a solution, not just come back and say there's a problem without a solution. The other thing is to say that 200 officers are out on a weekend isn't to say 200 are out in the juvenile division. So in the juvenile division, we need to have statistics that relate to the problem and not statistics that just point out why the chief's hands are tied. The other thing is to have these constant rotation means the constant abandonment of the youth. And it's very traumatic for them because what should be happening in the halls and the camps is relationship. If somebody is not there, you can't have relationship. And you don't know how much that is the cause of fights and violence in the halls when there is no relationship. Also, I want to second the idea that the abandonment of the core model really sets everything back in terms of was being very progressive in the adult division. And as was said, it leaves the adults without any support and without any relationship either. This lack of relationship makes the complete breakdown of the department, and that's leadership's problem.
Thank you. We'll go to our final speaker, which is Lupe Ross. Lupe, can you unmute yourself, please?
You hear me?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Thank you. After listening to the chief speak, I have not changed my mind about anything improving, period. I don't think he has the capability of doing that. What upsets me the most is I know that there's laws that prohibit a lot of things that the Board of Supervisors can do and the Commission can do also. But we already saw the disaster that's going on when he took the probation officers that we had in the community for our families to reach out to. And he put them at juvenile hall. Now he's taking the asking for the sheriffs to do the same thing. He doesn't know what he's doing now. He's really attacking the community because what about the single mother who's being abused by her baby daddies, and it's a what do they call it, domestic violence case, and she calls 911 and there's no sheriff because the sheriff is doing a home visit for a probation kid. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. He needs to go. The receivership needs to come in. We need a new path, new leaders. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take one more public comment, which is Dolores Canales. Dolores, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Dolores Canales. I am calling in as a community member today. I've been listening in, and some of the comments that I find disturbing, I was listening to the chief and I was sold. I was like, this is great. If he would have just explained it like this from the beginning, I would have understood. But I do have to say what is not making sense to me is how is somebody able to be employed 90 days and then 90 days all of a sudden, oh, we have to acknowledge these chronos or whatever it is they have, and so then now we're going to pay somebody overtime to do the same work that they could have been doing. That's not making sense to me. Another thing that was mentioned was staff wellness is supposed to be important in this. I have spoken to so many youth in the camps and halls, to so many line staff, and not once has the chief went in there, interacted with them like a team player, like somebody that really cares about wellness, like, interacted with them. How are you doing? How can I help? How can I roll up my sleeves, get to know the youth? Hey, I know things are seem crazy right now, but we're working on things. And then another thing about, I had no idea that the commission, and if I voted on it, I apologize about pulling all the line staff from the field if somebody made that comment. But one thing about the field is that, so we have parents that have called in that they have nobody. We have youth that have overdosed out on the street that were on probation but had nobody to report to. We've had a lot of different things and nobody to report to because there's no field staff. I'm sorry, I'm trying to talk fast because I know I'm on that time constraint thing. But I just listening in, and I'm in Hawaii, mind you, but that's how important this is to me. I have been listening in, and Caesar, I like to thank him for his comments earlier about how they're really working hard to let people out. But some of the things are not sitting well. And if you pay attention and you listen to the words and you listen to the presentation, it does not add up with what is actually going on. And one term I heard was smoking mirrors. And that's what I've seen today. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of our public comment, and I think the chief is going to address one of those questions.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't inadvertently, I want folks to understand a couple of things. The disability management program is individualized. So if there's anything I said that would lead you to believe that groups of people are being given orders because that's untrue. Every single one is treated individually because they have different requirements, different circumstances. So that continues. That's required by law. That's the county system, and it's a different department, DHR, that actually is ahead of that. So it is individualized. We'll talk about groups because that just makes it easier for us to understand that there are groups of people that are off work. The 90 days off work, to be clear, that is an actual attempt to accommodate, because we respect that the law has this great weight on accommodating employees. We have more employees than accommodations that are possible. This was an attempt to rotate so that what we could have had is a situation in which the first 500 employees received an accommodation, and they were accommodated through the entire 1 year, 1.5 year system. And then every subsequent employee that turned in a note would not have a place that they could go, and they would have to go burn their own time and essentially have no pay. So it's an actual attempt to be more fair and say everybody will get a piece of it while we have this excess. This is all temporary. This isn't a permanent situation. This is all temporary while case by case, we're able to go through and see if it's temporary or not. Again, I want to be clear. These are supposed to be temporary accommodations, so that should not be this rotation for the next 1.5 and 2 years. If there's a flaw here, it's in how long it takes and the fact that people go through 1 or 2 cycles, when in reality, I would love for it to be resolved within the first 90 days, and then we wouldn't have to do this. And so it's not that we're paying folks to be off work. Folks are using their leave during that period. To be clear about that. And with respect to the comment on safety, yeah, perhaps that's that issue here, that in fact, that is something different with this department, that they don't have safety retirement, and it puts the employees in a different predicament on when they're able to separate. And then lastly, I just have to say this because I think I'm just as frustrated as my staff is with me, because I don't believe I've ever said that I don't believe in field supervision, or that I don't understand deeply where I've spent most of my career, which is actually having an impact on folks' lives in the field and in their homes and with their employers. At no point have I said or made a judgment that that is not where the bulk of probation should be, because it has an impact on recidivism. What I've tried to explain is that when there is a minor that is in custody, there is no greater responsibility. They're a ward that is handed over to us, and that it is not a vote on that that's not important work. It's that I'm telling you, and I at some point, I hope employees understand, what decision would you make? And simply coming back and saying, close juvenile hall so that I can continue my work in the field is unreasonable, and it's not going to happen. This is the largest county. It's a good portion of the state. The courts demand that there is a juvenile hall. We can talk about how long kids are there and make sure that we have resources to get out, and all of that is fair game. But to simply say, because field work is so important, that we're going to close a juvenile hall, so that's just unreasonable. And I would invite folks to start giving suggestions that are something different than that. I would love to hear other ways in which we would continue performing more field work. And then lastly, let's not lie to each other. I'm unclear where folks jump to the conclusion that what we have done here has increased recidivism. And simply giving me a personal story on what you believe has happened on your caseload, or something you read in the news, we're professionals here. I'm unclear what your source document or what you're referring to that says that what has occurred here and the redirection of staff has increased recidivism. And I put the challenge out there because when this is said and done, we have to do better on field supervision. There's an overestimation on the impact that we have on the 20-some-odd thousand folks with the current processes that we have. So that in reality, I want to double down on what we do in the field so that we're actually measuring that what we're intending, the outcome that we're intending is actually what's happening. Because what I know from being in field supervision is that when you increase supervision, you increase recidivism. You increase people who are arrested. And so that's contrary to what I keep hearing here that's occurring. The wonderful example by the person on the phone, which is domestic violence. When you have more supervision on domestic violence, you have an initial spike in the number of arrests. And so while it may be useful to reduce re-victimization, we shouldn't talk past each other as if what happens with more supervision, unless you're very careful to make sure that there are wraparound services and what the interventions are, it doesn't simply create more impact to the jail and not what you intend on happening. So when we're in a position to re-tackle field supervision, that's where I want to be. That's going to be important. But again, I'll say it, you have minors that we essentially become their parents when they're in our custody. That is not a vote against the importance of field supervision. It's that with limited resources, that must be done.
Oh, I'm not
Trying
saying
to
anything. I'm
decide
just
to keep them
looking and
safe.
trying to put the order over here.
You can
Obviously, we're not going to get yes or no questions.
might be simpler
But you-
than these, though.
But also, I'm mindful of the nuances of this discussion. And I'm also mindful that we still have half of our agenda. So if we could actually limit our commenting and just get to the question, then that way we can reduce time, and then the chief can decide to limit his answers. And then we have a happy medium here. So I'm going to start and just go in order with Commissioner Jackson, followed by Commissioner Meredith, followed by Commissioner Prater. Is there anyone else to be followed? Followed by Commissioner Kokani. That's the order.
Thank you so much. Chief, if I may have your attention and dare to ask a question. I'd like to know why in December of 2024 you decided to resign. I'll say more about why I'm asking that, but I'd like to know what sort of led to that decision at the time.
That feels like such a personal question, but then I'm reminded that I'm a public officer. And in short, I will only remain in the position while I feel I have the ability to even have a chance to make a difference. And if you look to what happened in the months subsequent, there was a change in the coordination of the county resources toward probation. So just to backtrack, at that moment, I'm of retirement age, and to make a decision to continue, if I felt I couldn't make a difference, I didn't think was fair to anyone. There were some changes made after that in the consolidation of county resources that I think put us back with a possibility to make change.
Okay. I ask that because there's a lot of sharp criticism around your ability to effectively lead this department. And I think that without having any insight into what led to that decision, it felt like it was some evaluation of your self-evaluation of your ability to do your job. That's an assumption that I made, and I might have even said it a couple of times in meetings. I'm trying to understand how your self-evaluation of your ability to lead this department sort of aligns with or is not aligned with a lot of the comments that we're getting about your fitness to lead the organization. It's not an attack, but it's an attempt to really understand like how you feel about your ability to show up and do a job with so many impossibilities, it seems.
Yeah, so I take public comment, the union's comment and the employee comments very seriously. But I've been doing this a bit, and there's a difference between emotion because of one's circumstances. And to be quite honest, I simply empathize with folks' positions and where they're coming from and what they see and what affects them versus criticisms that are actually on point on things that can be done or should be done or where I've missed the mark. And so, I don't really care today to list areas where I've missed the mark and had to make adjustments. I do those. I have no problem changing direction if what I thought would have an outcome was wrong. But, what I'll ask folks is, I think much of what you'll hear is a conclusion and then nothing to support it. And really what you're hearing is an emotion. And so, I want to hear, should have done this instead, should have considered this, didn't take this into consideration or this recommendation. That's very different. That's actionable versus simply, I hate where we are, so somebody else should give a shot. That holds less weight.
Thank you so much for answering.
Well, I'll just start off a follow-up to that, Chief, is that I've been through 10 chiefs.
Oh.
I'll start up with a follow-up. I've been through 10 chiefs in 23 years, and I hear the same rhetoric from everybody all the time. So you're a better man than I am to sit there and take it. But more importantly, what I want to address is the fact that we do have two sides to probation, adult and juvenile. And I understand closing the field offices or minimizing staffing is a critical concern. One of the things, and I think you're trying to address this, is that I've come to the world of being a peace officer. So I know if I'm working homicide today, but essential service patrol needs to be staffed, that's where I am tomorrow. I don't think this department has had a culture of understanding that I'm a probation officer. I can be assigned anywhere at any time to make those critical needs. The camps are running pretty well. We don't seem to have a problem there. When we talk about juvenile halls, I've got to point out I was at Los Padrinos and I was sitting with 5 young men. They were 18 to 20 years old, all in there for murder. So they really weren't juveniles. And they had some good insight. And there was a probation officer in the area named M-A-I, who they all respected. And I got to tell you, he was doing a tremendous thing. So I look at that leadership that we have there. I just want to point out that I think it's great that you work with the unions to maybe look at some scheduling issues that might help. But on the safety retirement, that's a union issue that they need to bring to the table. And like I say, I know over the last 23 years between the board of supervisors, CEO, and unions, a lot of things hamstring what you can or can't do. As far as being light duty in the field office, I don't think people realize, yeah, I'm in the office, that's great. But if I go in the field, I could get into an altercation with somebody that would go against the restrictions I have. I point that out that up in Northern California, I think it was maybe Oakland or San Francisco, a state parole agent was killed in his office in the last few months. And in Stanislaus County, a probation officer was set on fire outside of their office. So it's not like there's not potential to danger to somebody who's light duty.
Thank you for that. And the Oakland parole office and the agent that's an office that I worked years ago, that was in the office. And so folks, they think that simply because they're at a desk, that no danger can come to them. That just isn't the case. We're dealing with folks that are in many circumstances in a bad place in their life, and it comes to the office. But when at some point this county gets healthy again and we revisit field services, I'm throwing out a challenge out there that if you're a peace officer and you're doing case management, unless you have visited with your client in their home, at their employment, with their children, you don't have much to add. And to simply think that you know someone because they've come into the office, let's stick to the domestic violence case. How do you determine whether somebody is complying with the conditions of no contact or going to their, if you simply see them in the office? They are simply representing their best sort of face to you. And from someone who's been in the field, if you even take the simple act of going into the parking lot, you may find that who drove them was the person that they had no contact with. And so when we talk about field services again, I hope that we're not talking about officers that think that from their desk, they're going to have a profound effect on people's lives. That just isn't the case. When someone comes to you and they're having difficulty gaining employment, the expectation should be that, at some point they get in your car, you take them to DMV, that you are actually a part of the solution. And if you think that it requires a peace officer to simply do referrals from your desk, I'm telling you that's not the case. We have a probation assistant position. We have social workers that we can do that. We can use other folks with lived experience that could do a good chunk of that. So if you're shying away from the peace officer side, you're really doing a disservice to this department. And that's something that we continue to come back to.
I forgot the order. Is it my turn?
It's on you.
That's on me. All right, cool. Just have one quick curiosity about the data you mentioned about when there are more field officers. Maybe I heard this wrong. When there are more field officers in the field, there's a spike in the number of you fill in the blank. And I wanted to understand better, like my knee-jerk reaction to hearing you say that is it because if there are fewer, that means there's less contact with folks that are under supervision, which means that when there are more, that means there's more contact, that means there's more, likely for incidents to come up or for things to happen. Can you help me understand the relationship between how you're making meaning of the fact that if there are more field officers, there's a spike?
Yeah, I didn't mean to have us go down a rabbit hole. I know it wasn't part of the agenda, but I think that folks that aren't sort of in this business sometimes tend to believe that more supervision means that the more compliance. But typically what ends up happening is that there are more opportunities to find a violation of conditions. And so that especially initially, if you're supervised more, you're going to go back into the system more frequently, or at least a good chunk of the folks for violations. In other words, if I only see you in the office once every 3 months, the chances of me finding a violation that is short of a new arrest is almost zero. If I have more interactions, the likelihood of finding a violation goes up. So it's counter to what folks think, more supervision, more compliance. Well, compliance in the sense that you find more violations because there's,
Commissioner Prater,
and it's not a monolith. It's not just everybody.
if I could offer, Donisha and I, after this meeting, will pull up some articles for you. There's quite a bit of academic research on this that comes not even from the law enforcement standpoint, but from the disparate impact around over-policing. It's more focused on law enforcement agencies than probation in terms of like the body of academic research, but I think it's something that might be helpful to the commissioners and the public to share about that. So Donisha and I will work on just compiling a little list of some of that research to share with you all.
That was a great question.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Well, Commissioner Kakani's been waiting patiently. She's got her 1 or 2 questions.
So sorry, I feel like I've asked you to explain this to me 3 times, but just one more time so I fully understand, right? This is like real life scenario. So I'm in my mid 40s, multitasking is now dangerous, on my phone, slip, hurt my ankle. Okay. So I can still maybe show up to my field position, right? But then I'm deployed. And is that then, so then I submit something requesting light accommodation because like, listen, my ankle's messed up, I can't run, or whatever it is that's, maybe prohibiting me from doing something that a juvenile hall position might require. At that point, is it HR or whoever who's like, is there a light duty position available in the hall for them for the next 90 days or for me? And if not, you're going to have to use your own time. Is that kind of how? And then after that 90 days, I can go back to my field position. Is that how it's working?
I feel like this is going to be the 3rd time you asked this.
Sorry, am I just?
No, we found a yes or no question. No.
Yeah. No, that's not how it works. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, but we have. But
Oh,
I can feel that. So any employee who comes in injured, we have to address that immediately. We don't wait until they're deployed. They're injured in that moment. We have to assess their classification and the big picture of what that requires. So we might be able to accommodate depending on the position, the person, and the injury immediately. But if we're looking at a sworn staff, then that starts us looking at, as the chief said earlier, all of the post requirements. So having a restriction of must use crutches for 45 days, whatever it is, that's going to impact their ability to do some of those post requirements. We're going to do that out the gate, whether they're field, whether they're juvenile.
but then I guess I don't understand then why Mr. Pettis says that he can do one thing for 90 days, but can't do.
So I don't know if the chief wants to field that.
So
it's the
we
can't address.
I know you can address, but just generally
But
speaking.
during the discussion, he said, if you have 500 positions that can be accommodated,
Right.
and the first 500 people are accommodated, then no one else could be. So the rotation, if I get this correctly, is saying, well, so everybody can be accommodated. Let's allow people to work 90 days in these 500 positions. Then let somebody else take a shot so they're not completely out of the loop.
Right. And I do want to take the opportunity to correct, because I have mentioned this several times, but I get it. There's a lot of numbers and things. And when I come, I'm talking about 80 different things. But the 90-day rotation with that, the accommodation is that we will provide a 90-day assignment That doesn't mean that in 90 days you come back. It means if is no one else waiting for an assignment, you might just continue.
I get
If
it now.
there are 5 people waiting for assignment, maybe it's a month. If there's 175 waiting for 140 positions, then
Right.
you're looking at 6 months.
Okay.
So it's the 90-day accommodation that we're currently, our process, not a policy. Our process is to be fair, exactly as was outlined, so that everybody has an opportunity to have one of those 90-day assignments.
And it's
The
almost like
time
the
in
field position is the
Yeah.
accommodation.
No, the accommodation is that we modify so that they're not expected to do home visits, that they're not expected
see.
to do deployment, so that they're not expected to do something that might put them in harm's way. So it is a modification to their peace officer. It may feel like day-to-day phone calls and case management, but it's missing that essential part.
That's not what's killing us, though. And this is an incredibly important point. That's not what's killing us. What's killing us is the high number of folks that we have with permanent accommodations and their belief that there's any peace officer position that they can do. It's this misunderstanding between the department and them that there is no peace officer position that can accommodate that permanent civility.
Okay. And then my second question was related to the probation assistant items, and there just being resistance. Is the resistance because the pay is less? Is the resistance because, yeah?
I think so. I
Okay.
think it's because, I don't think it's the only thing.
Okay.
The pay is less, and it may be,
It's a step down.
it may not be your exact assignment.
I see.
It's not like you stay exactly where you are and take the position. It may be in a different field unit.
Okay. Sorry. And then one last question related to law enforcement. I know that the department is now contracting with law enforcement agencies to kind of do the, I don't know what it is, the
They're not-
checks, the,
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity. We're not contracting out probation work. And so that's not what it is. It is an MOU with government entities to capture information of when they have contact with our probationers. In other words, if we assume that we're going to have less contact and we're going to have less information because folks are deployed and we have less field officers, I want to make sure that if they run into or if local law enforcement has interactions with them, that we can still do referrals and that we could still capture information so that we can either go up or down on risk and recidivism so that we can still case manage. So we're not asking them to do probation work. There's a whole host of overlap that's already allowed that they can do without our permission. This is an incentive to say, look, I need to know what's happening with our probationers that are in your city.
Okay.
And so I need that information, and in exchange for the amount of hours and time that you're utilizing, we'll via MOU pay for that.
I guess, how does that work? So if you're contracting with the Pomona Police Department to just share information or to actually go check on people, or what
There's,
is the?
yeah, there's no mandate now. And I think this week, though, there's a training that's being provided for various law enforcement to talk about what the limitations are, how you're acting on your own behalf, and how to share information with us. So for example, if Pomona Police Department or any police department has contact with a probationer and they want to get a hold of an officer to ask follow-up questions, they can do that. They can also on their own, by the way, just because a person is on probation, let's say have these search terms, if they choose to do that, we want the information so that we can determine whether there's a violation, whether there's a referral for services that's needed, things that we otherwise wouldn't know, we're now able to utilize during this period. They're going to be able to submit for hours utilized. Now, this may look very different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There may be a city that says, we're going to dedicate some officers to work with probation or probation services during this period where there may be a lag. Where another city will say, no, we're short-staffed ourselves, but this is going to incentivize doing something more than simply putting it in the supervised release file, that we're actually going to tell probation, hey, 2 a.m., stopped him. There was nothing there. Just wanted to let you know. We put that information. We put it in field notes, and it may mean nothing in that moment, but there may be a pattern, and then an officer, probation officer, is assigned to say, "Take a look. Something's going on here," and follow up.
So Commissioner Terry and then Commissioner Jackson, and then we're actually going to have to go on
Actually,
with this.
my question was answered. I was concerned about co-supervision, kind of like increasing the risk for violations, incarceration. So I'm good.
So Commissioner Terry,
Well, can I take her place since she's not going to ask for a question? Thank you.
if you take my place.
Just a quick clarifying question. Can MOUs be developed with CBOs who can then report positive things that are happening? So for example, this person got a job. I know you all maybe haven't gotten in contact with them, things that could actually maybe, be positively reported about those individuals?
Yeah, so it's an interest, I like how you did that. But the reports to us don't have to be negative. It could be, hey, I ran into so-and-so, he really needs a job referral, or he needs to get into this, and then we can follow up. Two, we're not closed to probationers or their families contacting us and giving us updates. That's not done. That will continue. I'm intrigued by your suggestion. I don't think it would be an MOU to report positive because we just want to know, but I think that we may have an opportunity to develop non-sworn resources and referrals and services. I think there's room for that now. This is one of the areas where it may not need to be a peace officer, right?
I just want to as a rejoinder to that, say that a lot of the CBOs that are working in the SYTF step down space report monthly to the courts and to probation.
Yeah.
All information, positive and not so positive. So all of that kind of gets reported. But my question was I want to make sure I understand the MOU sort of situation with the different police departments. And so if perhaps let's just say a youth who's in the care of a CBO in community, right, serving the time in community, they're out, they get picked up by a police department. Does that police department have a responsibility when they discover that a youth is on probation to report or to notify the Department of Probation when they pick up a probationer?
There's no mandate, and so after it'd be 1 or 9, there's no mandate, and they can act on their own generally. However, you described an arrest, so that's something that we're going to receive, whether they do or not. There's a system in which they can put the information if they so choose. What we're doing is we're incentivizing communication with us because it's not mandated.
Okay, so if there is an arrest, so there's a process. So like if there is an arrest of a probationer by any, say, police department in the county, then probation is notified?
Yes, we would get that regardless of this MOU.
And in what time frame do you get that? Just curious.
Oh, as soon as they put it in, it depends on, I'd have to go back when it's run, but that's immediate. Yeah.
Probably as soon as they book, because it's all being uploaded into the same system that we all take.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chief, can we take a 10-minute break?
Please.
Do you have time?
Yeah, I do. I'll stay.
Okay, it is now 11:48. We'll return at 12.
Chair.
That's right. Commissioners, it is now 11:59. We are scheduling for a 12 o'clock start, which is 30 seconds from now. Oh, man, what did I do with my coffee? What did I do with my coffee? Where's my coffee? Interesting. Hey, thank you for getting back on time. We are now going to move to item number 4, which is to discuss and take possible action on the probation department's depopulation plan updates. This update will include progress on the movement of youth to Camp S. Kilpatrick, Barry J. Nardoff, Camp Joseph Page, as well as changes in programming at those 3 facilities, updates on communication with partner agencies and community-based organizations around the implementation of programs and services, and BSCC compliance updates on the suitability of Barry J. Nardoff, SYTF, and LP juvenile halls. And that was a mouthful. Okay, Chief, and you're on.
I hope you don't mind if I keep my comments brief in light of the fact that there's a presentation before the board tomorrow that's more complete and to allow for public comment there. But I think I could just update where the facts of where we are in terms of, or just for clarity, sort of some competing actions. The 2nd of next month, we have a local court hearing with respect to the depopulation plan, and that is what outlined the movement of youth into the different facilities. Not to be confused with a hearing with respect to the challenge by the Attorney General to establish a receiver around the same time. But 2 completely different issues. They've not legally, there's no overlap between what's being heard in those courts yet. So with respect to the depopulation plan, where we are today is that Nydorf has essentially been converted into facility for 2 different populations. I'd like to think of it as 2 separate facilities. One is the existing SYTF, which is approved by BSCC. The other is for all intents and purposes, a juvenile hall for those that are on track to be SYTF. That was created per the depopulation plan with an attempt to decrease the population at LP. There are, I think there were 39, maybe as of today, there are 37 young men there. And again, those are separate. Think of them as 2 separate facilities. One is for predisposition youth, boys that are on track to be SYTF, and then the other is the normal SYTF. BSCC is aware. It is not approved, but they are aware of it, and they continue, or they have committed to continue inspection in all facilities where we house youth, whether they're BSCC approved or not. I want to make clear that we are seeking BSCC approval in all of our locations, including LP. Camp Page had been emptied for some modifications. Those modifications have been completed. No youth have been moved in there yet. And then the girls' campus at Kilpatrick has undergone some renovations to make it more appropriate for that population. And we've coordinated with BSCC for inspections. I believe they'll be there at least for a partial or pre-inspection this week. And so no one's been moved in there, and we're waiting for sort of the outcome of their inspection. Hold there.
And programming with partners or community-based organization, how's that going?
So the meetings that had been established before the global plan continued, they were converted into the depopulation plan. And so those have continued. It's always difficult because the number one thing is when are they moving so that we could do some planning. And so we still don't have that date, especially for Kilpatrick, but those meetings continue.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Harris?
Could you get a little more granular, if you can, about an updated staffing plan for CVK, just because it is, the greater distance and more youth will be there? What you can share about the staffing, not only from your department, but the ancillary or, co-located services as well as CBO support. If you have specifics, that would be good to hear.
That's always been a difficult one for me because the facility was created for many, many more youth. Simply the fact that, we had 20 or less, it was built for 150, many more, with all the partner agencies prepared to provide services. Somehow, because we artificially kept it low, now it seems like an incredible challenge to be able to provide any of those. It's also slightly confusing to me because this county has had many camps further away where they've had larger populations and we've been able to provide services. What I can tell you is that this Kilpatrick has not been a problem with respect to staff wanting to work there. And the canvassing of who is interested on working there, I'm talking about the probation staff, has already occurred. And there are more volunteers that want to work there than we will need. So it does not appear that that's going to be one of our difficult places to staff. I really can't speak on behalf of partners with respect to that. They're aware of the population. They've all been on site in terms of where they need space. They may still report some challenges in them getting staff to work there, and maybe amount of staff. But in terms of being part of the work groups and going physically to the location and being given the space that's taking place, with respect to them being able to get the staff, I really don't want to speak on their behalf.
Commissioner Kokani?
I believe you stated that you're still seeking BSCC approval for the pre-dispo part of Barry J. Has the BSCC returned, or is there a timeline for when they will be returning to conduct that reinspection?
Yeah, I don't have a timeline. I think what they've indicated is they're going to do an overall inspection of the. I think they've indicated it's not going to be targeted. It'll be a larger inspection.
Okay.
I don't recall if they told us when.
Okay. And then I could be wrong, but I believe I had heard that staff didn't necessarily accompany. So, 37 young people from LP had moved to Barry J, and that there wasn't staff from LP that accompanied those young people. Is that correct? Is there sufficient staffing at Barry J, or what is the status of that?
Yeah, it's like one of those incomplete information scenarios. We have to go back to all of the staff, nearly all of the staff from Kilpatrick went to Nydorf.
Okay.
So 60 some odd staff. So that when we added the youth from LP, they already had more staff that had been sent there than would be needed.
Got it.
Now that doesn't, I don't want to discount. Folks at both Nydorf and LP feel like they're short staffed. So it doesn't discount that on any given day, they feel like there isn't enough staff. But when I look at the roster of where we've dedicated staff, we dedicated more staff than the number of youth that was moved.
Will those will those staff who are currently at Barry J return to Kilpatrick when it's staffed up, or are you recruiting like a separate group of folks?
It'll be a combination. It'll be some of those folks and some other. We're trying to be very careful to have the appropriate sort of gender designation from staff, and so that's why it'll be a bit different. It won't be all of the staff going back.
And then you shared that camp page modifications are done. And if I recall correctly, camp page was going to be used as part of your plan for young folks who were post-dispo, but maybe awaiting placement or
That was
transfer.
Right. Instead of doing all the assessments while they were still at the juvenile hall, move them immediately, do that initial assessment for them there. Um, Since the priority is to reduce the LP population, as of today, we've already sort of accommodated those numbers that we had at LP between the other two camps. And to not exacerbate the staffing crisis, we're just going to hold until we do the other moves, and that'll be the last piece.
Okay. So right now there's no real timeline then for camp page to be used.
It'll be after the move to Kilpatrick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. And then as it relates to Kilpatrick, if BSCC were, I think you shared that they're there, or they're planning on coming this week. If they were to approve Kilpatrick for this multi-population use, how quickly do you foresee transferring young folks?
We'd be prepared to do those moves within 30 days after the approval.
Okay. And then I guess hopefully that will give you enough time to ramp up programming for the population, or do you feel like you're already in a position to, based on your initial conversations and these meetings that you're having with?
No, there'll still be some modifications and some growing pains. We have the benefit of the pace at which we move the young people there. So the hope would be not to move more folks than we have services for, and we could throttle that a bit.
Okay.
Can it be one more question so we can see if there's, okay.
Oh, no, sorry. There was a question about pepper spray at the last POC meeting. And if there is an intention to use pepper spray or OC spray at Kilpatrick. And I think Ms. Roman had said that we needed to ask you. So now that you're here, would love to ask you what your intention is with OC spray at Kilpatrick.
I would love to have the ability to tell you who you should ask with that. This is extraordinarily difficult for our staff. I want to be sensitive with respect to this because the safety of the youth and staff is important. And I think I've made independent, clear decisions in the past that run counter to pressures from the county. But I want folks to understand the logic here. I only authorized OC because of an active emergency and situation in which there was no other alternative.
At LP, you're saying, or authorizing it generally?
At LP.
At LP, right.
Campus Kilpatrick will be a new facility for the purposes of the youth that are going there. And it would be a mistake to authorize OC within those units. It would be counter to the environment we're trying to create, counter to motions from the Board of Supervisor. But I'm also mindful of the fact that fights do occur, and depending on the number of staff that we have there, that we need to make sure it's safe and it's safe for that community. But so I know I've been going a little long today. All my visits won't be like this. I'll try to answer more directly. But it's important for me to folks to understand the why, that these decisions, you don't just jump to it because it's popular or because it's because we're trying to get to the right thing. And so upon activation, there is not going to be OC deployed to every officer within those units. I want to make clear, I think that, and this is just a security matter, every facility we have should have some capacity to be able to utilize, for example, OC or other equipment that's necessary to prevent escape. That's different than being able to simply carry it for day-to-day use. So we may be in a situation in which There is no OC given to officers as they go in, but there may be an armory in which there is OC for an emergency or protection of the youth if there is an insurgency, all of those other things.
Thank you.
Okay, Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments?
As of earlier, we did not have any written public comments. If they have been received, I apologize, and we will certainly upload them to the agenda. You can send them to info@poc.lacounty.gov. If you'd like to make public comment in the room, please approach the podium. If you're on WebEx, please use the raise your hand feature. If you're calling into WebEx, please dial *3 on your phone. That will put you in line. If you're on YouTube, you cannot make public comment. You need to log in on WebEx. And we will begin here with Helen.
A quick question, just so I understand this, because I keep hearing that the kids at LP Juvenile Hall who are being moved to Barry J that are pre-dispo are SYTF track. But if they're pre-dispo, how do we know they're SYTF track? Isn't that making huge assumptions? It's a genuine question, so to help me understand.
I'm pressing pause on your time. Since this is a public meeting, you have 2 minutes. So if you want to use your 2 minutes, you can use your 2 minutes.
Okay.
And then the panelists have the option about whether to respond or not.
Okay, so I'll just leave it at that then.
Okay,
Cool.
thank you.
Thank you.
My 2 minutes started.
Yes, your 2
Okay.
Actually,
Actually, there's only a minute 40.
Oh, okay. It's a fantastic question. Thank you. No, it's a great question because I want to go back to they are still, and for purposes of the regulations that apply to them, it's still a juvenile hall. So even though we've identified that in all likelihood they're going to be with us longer and the services that they need should be targeted at the fact that they're not going to be gone within 30 days, right? That's why we're grouping them, and we think that it's going to be better because they're going to be with us even if they're pre-dispo for longer. That's the purpose. In terms of how it's decided that they go over there, it's because when they're going through the court process, one of the initial things that's decided in the probation officer report is if this is likely or recommended to go down. But that does not mean that while they're going to court, they're not still pre-dispo and they could be released. They could go to camp.
Okay, we don't have any hands raised online, so we can go back to you.
Perfect. We'll tie it up with some follow-up questions. Commissioner Terry?
Hi, I had a question about the family visitation. I was at Barry J this weekend, and it seemed like people were very appreciative of the gas gift card vouchers, but it's not available to everyone. It's only available to parents with SYTF youth. Can you clarify what that distinction is, and if it will be made available to all family members who visit?
No, I'll have to get back to you on where the funding and the why. I'm not sure.
Okay. And then for programming, 2 questions. Has everyone who wanted to come over from Kilpatrick, who wanted to go to Barry J, all the providers been able to come over? Have there been any challenges with getting those services in place at Barry J?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm just thinking back on, I've signed a number of contract amendments to be able to get them there, but I just feel anytime I say that, you'll have an example of a difficult case. Not that I'm aware of. If there has been, feel free to send it directly to me so I can intervene.
Okay. And then last question with programming, are there any differences in how programming is being approached at Barry J now, given the distinction with the 2 kind of tracks of young people who are there?
That's the plan. That's the idea, to have a different director and to have the idea for all of these communities. It's more specific to their needs. How developed it is at this point, I don't want to over promise on where we are with it. But that's the idea, and that's sort of what folks have been tasked with. We'd have to come back to give you specifics on how they differ and what the services are.
Okay, seeing no other hands up. sure? Okay, Chief, thank you. Ms. Carly, thank you. Agenda item number 6, during which we will discuss and take possible action on a motion to request information regarding the probation department's use of consultants during the past 2 fiscal years and costs associated with those contracts. To begin, Commissioner Harris will share some background, the POC's interest in this issue, and present a motion that is attached to the agenda. Commissioner Harris?
Thank you. So during POC meetings, probation leadership staff frequently refer to projects and works being led or implemented by consultants, consulting organizations, or outside legal representation. This motion would help us better understand the degree to which the probation department receives external support from hired organizations and consultants. There is a motion before you, which lays this out very clearly. There is an updated motion that I believe was uploaded today that has some red text in addition to the motion which you all reviewed before today's meeting. This also would just say, ask the department to indicate if the vendor is a for-profit organization or a nonprofit 501c3 public entity. It would also ask for has some clarifying information about whether or not these are open competitive bid processes for proposals, and then ask for master agreement, purchase work orders, or sole source contracts. And then finally, it asks for some clarification about sole source contracts. So it really seeks to have the department provide via Excel spreadsheet information about consultants, consulting organizations, or law firms from July 1st, 2023 to August 31st, 2025. Very easily organized name of the entity, name of the contract, primary point, brief purpose of the contract, description of the purpose, name of probation division that manages it, methods used to procure the contract, start date, end dates, dollar amounts, or hourly rate of services billed, source of revenue that probation is using to pay for the contracted work, and the amount that probation has paid the person or legal representative or organization to date, as well as the scope of works that are agreed upon by the department and the consulting firm.
Commissioner Harris, commissioners, questions, concerns, comments? Oh, I guess we got to get a second first.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Kakani. Commissioner Meredith?
We have something in there for performance reviews.
To see if the contract hits the mark?
Yes.
Great idea. Yeah, I think that's right. Commissioner Meredith, I make a motion to add.
Does she have to make a motion?
You can just amend it, and then
Okay.
we'll ask Commissioner Kakani if she agrees with the amendment.
Okay, I'd like to add number 5. We would be asking the department to evaluate whether or not the probation to provide any performance reviews or, a status on the fulfillment of the services provided as outlined in the scope of work.
So this is pretty extensive. Is there a timeline that you would like this return? Did I miss that?
It is extensive. I don't have a brilliant idea on that. I don't know.
I was actually looking to Commissioner Kakani to make sure that that change is acceptable to you as the seconder.
That change is acceptable.
45 days? So not by our next meeting, which frankly I will not be at, but by the following.
Commissioner Terry.
I just had a quick question about number 3 to make sure I'm clear. We're asking for copies of the budgets of the consultant. So we'd want to know their operating budgets.
No. Oh, I read that and the intention was, the operating. Well, that's a good question.
The budget for the proposal of work. Yeah.
I read
Yeah.
it to mean like, oh, if my company was a contractor, you'd need to want a copy of my organization's operating budget.
Right.
Just for this work. Okay.
Should there be another amendment to clarify? An
You think we need it?
addendum?
I don't think we need it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure if 45 days is enough, but that's just my concern. Going back to 2023, how many months is that?
It's 2 years, right?
2 straight years.
Yeah.
But if everybody feels it's enough, I mean, I'm fine. I just, running a business with contracts, if you can weigh in.
Yeah, I just want to, now I'm looking at the number 3, that feels overly broad. Maybe we should get more specific there. When that reads, submit PDF copies of the budget, I think that, to make sure that I'm just kind of underscoring that. Copies of the budget detail and pay schedule describing the contractor's or law firm's operating budget, allowable expenses and how the agreed upon sum will be expended. Maybe we should probably get more clear around that, because it does seem like that is requesting. I was thinking
With respect to the contract, right? Is that what? Yes.
Yeah, but I'm
So we
saying,
can-
like, if I were a contractor reading that, I would probably interpret that to mean, so then maybe, is there a different way we can kind of phrase this? I don't know that it just simply adding with respect to the scope of work clarifies it enough. I don't know if that goes further.
I think just the operating budget with respect to the contract entered into with probation. Is it? Or
I guess it sounds to me sort of like, I wonder, because we're asking in section 1, with a dollar amount of contract, hourly rate or services billed, do we already get to that question by asking that under number H in section 1?
I don't know. I certainly don't think so, but that's just my limited knowledge, right? Like I just think of the contracts that we enter into with funders, and it's, there's a bottom line amount. So like, okay, $100,000 from this org, but it's very different from the budget that I provide as to how that $100,000 will be spent. Will it be best spent on, 45 hours of legal research? Will it be spent on, I don't know, hundreds of miles of travel?
Yeah, but like, if you have in any agreement you make with a contract, all that should be specified in the scope of work. And so asking for a firm's operating budget and allowable expenses I don't know if that answers. You understand what I'm saying? I hear what you're trying to say, like, well, H just sort of says the dollar amount of the contract and hourly rate, right? So then we understand the amount of the contract, but you want to know like how each of those dollars are being spent. I think but that typically is laid out in the scope of work. And so you don't need a firm's operating budget for that, right?
The word operating tripping you up?
Yeah, it's
Okay, so I think the purpose of the motion really is to better understand the money that's being spent on external services and why, and the return on investment, right?
I'm totally in support
So
of the
let's-
intention.
I think keeping it in there, I'd propose that we keep it in there as number 3, as a separate thing. We can delete the word operating budget and say project budget or representation,
Yes. Yeah.
representation budget. I don't know. That's not the right.
Yeah, no, these aren't hostile questions. I want to just make sure I'm clear. I'm supportive of the intention here. I just want to make sure that we can eliminate the chance that there'll be more questions and then a delay in the information that you want because things aren't crystally clear. And then that might cause more questions. We'll say, well, now we got to go back to all of our vendors and all of our contractors and say, we need your operating budget. And then I can imagine them, because I'd be saying, for what? Why do you need my entire operating, you know what I'm saying? And so so I just don't want them to be any hurdles to the goal here. So I'm asking these questions just so that probation doesn't then ask these questions, and then the contractors don't ask these questions. So that's the reason why I'm kind of nailing down on this. So no, I'm super supportive.
Made that notation.
I heard strike the word operating, and then I heard two things. Commissioner Kokani suggested it say with respect to the contract entered into with probation, and then Commissioner Harris, you said something different, slightly different than that.
I'll go with Commissioner Kokani.
Okay.
Okay, so
The timeline, did you want to make it like 60 days and then have them request that they need more time? Or do you want to stay with 45?
Let's stay with 45 so that we can attempt to discuss this at the November meeting. Get this information. If probation can't, I think at this point, the line of communication is very open between the commission and, the department, and they can say that that would be an impossible task to meet or not.
Oh, I have to have one other comment too. So Commissioner Harris, so I guess maybe I'm thinking about some of if the preamble here talks about, that probation is saying that they're outsourcing a lot of their consulting work and other things, right? And so we want to kind of better understand that. Is there a way that are there specific types of consulting or services or contracting that we're hoping to target with this, or are we?
See it all.
And the reason why I'm asking that is because I know that there are a number of folks, particularly in the SYTF step-down area, that operate with probation with zero contract in place. And so I don't know if you want that, if you're attempting to capture that too, because then maybe you should split it out, because this is all assumes that everything that they do is contracted. There are lots of folks who partner with them, CBOs that do not have contracts with them. I just want to say that for the record.
That's a great point, Commissioner. I think the way that let me think. That's a great point.
Yeah, I'm just going to put them
Yeah.
to consider that they're, so maybe we should include that if we aren't narrowing the scope or the target for this particular motion, that if we say all, then there could, I don't know. I know that, again, in the SYTF space, there are a number of providers who operate without a contract because some of the services in that collaboration is court ordered.
as consultants, because there's a difference between providers and
Programs.
consultants.
I mean, I guess what I was asking, sort of like what this, it feels broad about like who we're trying to get to understand, like who are you consulting with, who are you paying, who are you contracting with to do work? And so again, just trying to get narrow with it so I can understand and just so I can kind of.
I don't read this as including program service providers, people that are coming into the facilities and doing credible messengering, or folks that are providing less restrictive placements or other things like that. I read this, and the intention was, who is probation leadership, the department consulting with to improve internal operations of the department to address all of the things we talk about at our meetings, right? The overall functioning of the department, the legal representation that they've sought outside of county council, those types of things, sort of the big picture, but not the program level providers.
Understood. I just wanted to say that if that is happening with program partners, I wonder, is there a world in which they are contracting or doing work with consultants sans a contract? So I'm saying, so I wanted to kind of put that on you know what I mean? Like, what if, so you sure that with SYTF, they may not have, that is not the scope of this, but what if they are? Who knows? I don't know if they are, but I know that in some capacities, they operate with folks without a contract. And so what if there are consultants? So I just want to kind of just say that, in case they're like, yeah, we're doing this work with this consultant. There's no contract in place, but we're still doing that work. You know, for your consideration, not for amendment language, just for.
Well, it doesn't sound like there's an amendment, an addendum there.
Let's start. Let's start here.
That's a great start. Wendy, we facilitate a vote, then we do public comment?
No, we do public comment first.
Okay, Wendy, is there any public comment, live, written?
We had no written public comment on this issue. I don't believe there's anybody in the room to give public comment. Do we have anybody online for public comment? I may already have the answer to that question and haven't looked. No.
Okay,
No hands? Okay.
right, unless there are no further questions and comments, Wendy, would you facilitate the vote?
Yes. Okay, so we are voting on the revised POC motion requesting probation contracts, which is an attachment to the agenda. There are a variety of amendments which were accepted both by Commissioner Harris, who made the motion, and Commissioner Kokani, who seconded it. The first was to add 45 days as the deadline. The second was to add number 5, probation's performance review, the status on fulfillment. And the third was to change the language of number 3 to remove the word operating, and after the word budget, add with respect to the contract entered into with probation. That sound correct?
Yes.
Okay, so please vote yes, no, or abstain. And I should note, we've noted this in the minutes, but Commissioner Jackson had left at the break. We do still have quorum. So yes, no, or abstain. Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson is gone. Commissioner Kokani?
Yes.
Commissioner Meredith?
Yes.
Commissioner Prater?
Yep.
Commissioner Terry? Chair Mundo.
Yes.
So with Commissioners Canales, Jackson, and Shipp being absent, the motion passes unanimously.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, now we will be going to item number 7 on the agenda. We will hear a report from Executive Director Wendy Julien about the observations so far and reports on how visitations are handled at the juvenile facilities. The full report back will be presented at the October POC meeting. Wendy, please proceed with your updates.
Thank you. I'm actually going to turn this over to Dr. Gongora, but I will say in advance that what we did not have on the agenda today was the 2 inspections that are fully complete, which are the Barry J. Nydorf inspection and Campus Kilpatrick. I'm pleased to say that the reason we took Barry J. Nydorf off of the agenda today is because probation has asked for the opportunity to respond to the inspection, which is what we would like. And we will be having a town hall on September 25th. It's virtual. I believe it's at noon to discuss those 2 inspections. They won't be final yet because you all haven't voted on them. They'll still be in draft format, but they will have responses from the department, which will be great. So please tune in for that. You'll see an invitation to that shortly. And Dr. Gongora is just going to give a brief update about what we're doing on the visitation inspections. There will be a full report back on this at the next POC meeting in October.
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning or good afternoon, commissioners. So you all voted in September to have the staff of the POC lead up some inspection for visitation. And we've been focusing those inspections at Los Padrinos and Barry J. Nydorf SYTF. And so POC staff and commissioners, some of you have signed up to do those. And so far we've done 5 inspections with another 6 more to go throughout the month of September. The visitation at Barry J. Nydorf so far has, all the notes have looked like things have gone really smoothly. The visitation at Los Padrinos has had its challenges. I'd like to just share about a couple of those, and then of course we'll do a more thorough report back in October. But most of those challenges so far have related to uneven application of rules and some rules that we might consider outdated. So many of the visitors have talked to us about the perception that rules have been changing, that sometimes rules can change even weekly. One week something is okay that they've worn, the next week it's not okay. And another issue has been around tattoos. Like one week the tattoo is okay, another week the tattoo is not okay. Some weeks they're allowed to cover it up, some weeks they are turned away from the facility. And this has led some of the visitors to feel that there's an aspect in play of some profiling potentially, or some biases against people that look certain ways. And also, in a more sad way, that the department is not supporting visitation, and almost like people are being discouraged from visiting. So, some of those things around tattoo and dress code, we've been having some conversations as we're at the facility about even what's realistic. Is it realistic to say no shorts when we're asking people to visit outside in 95-degree weather for 2 hours, right? So we're all having these conversations in an ongoing way while we're at the facilities, and of course, we'll follow up next month.
I'll just add to that my gratitude to OICR, the State Office of Youth and Community Restoration, who has done a significant amount of research statewide about best practices and are working with us directly with our recommendations and the process for doing interviews. And also to let you know that the department is not necessarily waiting. In fact, they're not waiting at all, and have also engaged with OICR in conversation since we met in September. So I'm actually hopeful that we will be able to report that there have been some changes by the time we issue our report. And that's the way this goes. And it's the reason why it's good to have these conversations in public, is that hopefully we can solve some of the problems before we even report on them.
Thank you. Before I open it up to questions and concerns, Dr. Gongora, are there any openings left for commissioners to participate?
There are, and we encourage people to double up or triple up, even if people are signed up. It's hard sometimes because people are coming out of the visitation in groups. And so you can only grab so many people to talk to them. And sometimes, people are relaying stories that they don't want to tell publicly. And so they're preferring to talk in a one-on-one basis. So the more the merrier, and the more people that we have there, we can engage more parents and get into the facility as well. So we can ask young people about their visitation experiences.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, questions, concerns? Commissioner Meredith, use a mic.
Is there a standardized policy for all the facilities?
No,
I was going to say there's policy.
There are, on last month's agenda, you will see there are multiple policies. There's an SYTF parent handbook policy. There's a DSB Detention Services Bureau policy. There's an RTSB, which is Camps and Dorothy Kirby Center policy. And then there are, in addition to that, posters at the facilities that have different rules. There's one that I've used the example multiple times at Barry J. Neidorf that says no culottes. I'd love to do a little survey of the current parent and youth population about who knows what that means. So there are discrepancies among the policies at the individual facilities, some which make some sense because the facilities are different, but some I think is just inconsistencies that don't seem to have a lot of basis.
I would think a custody facility is a custody facility, and one policy should cover it all.
Okay, unless okay, Wendy, do we have any written or live public comment?
No written public comment on this. I don't believe we have any public comment in the room. If you want to make a public comment, raise your hand. While you're doing that, I will take the liberty of adding to my executive director's report a happy birthday wish to our chair, Eduardo Mundo, whose birthday is tomorrow. So happy birthday, and thank you for the work that you do.
I will be at Camp Rocky on my birthday. Unless Commissioner Meredith replaces me.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Gongora. Agenda item number 8. This is where matters not posted on the agenda to discuss or placed on a future meeting agenda for action. Commissioners, Commissioner Harris.
Go ahead first.
Okay. So I would like to request that we add a topic about the challenges the department has in accurately collecting, analyzing, and reporting data. This is an ongoing issue. it's been going on for many years. One of the key functions of the POC is to evaluate the department's progress towards implementing reform, but it's very hard, if not impossible, given the department's internal data challenges. I'll never forget Deputy Director Epps talking very frankly about the fact that she would have difficulty getting information from the department that she was, in a very high position about. So one of the issues is that the department is decentralized and that the management systems are antiquated. We have struggled to receive consistent high quality data from the department since the inception of the POC, and other agencies such as the Office of the Inspector General, Vera Institute, and a joint report published by researchers from Cal State, LA, and USC also confirmed that this is a really huge struggle. We know that the department has data and research units, so it's unclear why we can't get accurate, public, consistent data. I would like to request that at the next POC meeting, the Probation Department's Chief Information Officer and other relevant executive level managers present an overview of the department's data management systems and structure, to hear about what the data teams do, how they are structured, how they're working to mitigate these longstanding problems. And I would also like to know why the department stopped publishing ProbStat and sharing population data on a public facing dashboard, and when it intends to return to that practice.
Thank you. We will take that up at the leadership meeting. Commissioner Terry.
I think just given the conversation today around the MOU practice with law enforcement, I think trying to get better understanding around where is that overlap. Some of the things the chief mentioned about what the law enforcement is already doing, what they're maybe being incentivized to do, I just think maybe warrants further discussion.
Noted. Commissioner Meredith.
I just want a recognition here that unfortunately, in August of 1968, the 24th, Los Angeles County Probation Department lost Crew 44 during the Canyon fire up in Azusa, along with a firefighter specialist. And through the efforts of Supervisor Barger, a memorial has been established at Fire Station 97. So I just want to recognize that loss. And then in September of 1955, in the Hacienda fire, we lost 4 fire crew members from probation, and Glenn Rocky, who was a fire captain with LA County Fire, died trying to rescue them, and that's who Camp Rocky is named after. So I want to recognize that. There is a plaque for them at the La Habra Heights Fire Department, but more importantly, Chief Arcos has agreed to take on the task of creating an annual memorial recognition for them, so it will not go unnoticed in the future.
Thank you. Commissioner Kakani.
Just as it relates to the presentation on intake today, I felt like I walked away with more questions, which I appreciate given what was shared. So I would love at some point in the near future an additional presentation on like real specifics around how the LADS is being improved, what questions are actually being asked. My recollection is that the LADS is like a 10-point scoring thing, and you get a point if you're a boy. I could be misrecollecting, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of a piece that at one point lived in it. And so I'm just curious to hear about how that detention screener is evolving, how staff is being trained on it. Director, I might mispronounce your last name, I'm so sorry.
Mayor Quinn.
Mayor Quinn, not Mayorkin? Mayorkin, thank you. How Director Mayorkin was talking about training, and it's hard to rest assured with this department, especially as the number of young people who are inside LP is increasing, and that we're continuing to operate this facility unlawfully. So I would love, yes, additional data, additional presentations on exactly the specifics of what questions are being asked. Are developmental disabilities being taken into account and considered? What does it mean to be a crossover youth? Like all of those specific questions, and how investigations are conducted and trainings are offered specifically.
Commissioner Kakani, I just want you to know that sometime probably in October. We haven't set the date yet. We will also be having a town hall specifically focused on the LA detention screener, the LADS, as well as on the law enforcement agencies, the rates at which they bring young people into the halls. So I think that I may actually turn into more questions, not necessarily more answers, but certainly will lead into what you're suggesting in terms of a future presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect. That ends item number 8. Item number 9 is an invitation for members of the public to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Wendy, please facilitate public comment for us.
Thank you. And we welcome anyone to give public comment now on items that were not on the agenda today. I see at least one hand raised. You can use the raise your hand function or the *3 if you're calling in. And I don't see anybody in the room here for public comment. So we'll start with call-in user number 7. Your number starts with 818-374. You can dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Taliba. And first, before I begin, I want to tell Commissioner Mundo happy birthday. Something that I would like the commission to possibly bring in one of the meetings I feel that is lacking is taking steps to develop a committee involving line staff who can give suggestions to management. Because right now we don't have that, and we've offered that to Guillermo. He hasn't accepted us to be able to bring our suggestions on the table. And a lot of the things that he's getting right now is from people that he's newly hired, from people that he knows from San Bernardino County, Department of Corrections, who have no clue of how this organization runs and how much input, because there's a lot of us that have a lot of good suggestions. And so I don't know if that's something that can be put on an agenda at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coffey. That's the end of our public comment.
Thank you. With that, we will move to item number 10, adjournment of the special meeting of September 15, 2025. Thank you all for joining us and sharing your comments. As a quick reminder, be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel at LA County POC. To receive reminders about our upcoming meetings, visit our website at poc.lacounty.gov to subscribe to our email listings. It is now 12:51. May I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting? Commissioner Prater, may I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Harris. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves and vote with a voice vote. Aye. Aye. Today's meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.